Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most beautifully unhinged battlegrounds in modern history, the American dinner party of the 1960s, where a single woman in a tract house was expected to reproduce the formal entertaining of a Victorian mansion alone, with no staff, out of cans, not with swords, not with armies, not even with money. No, with 3 forks, a gelatin salad, and a tablecloth that had to hang exactly 18 inches over the edge or civilization would apparently collapse. It's good to have you here, and if these help you drift off, a like and a subscribe go a long way. And if your family owns a fondue set that has been used exactly once and then lived in a cupboard forever after, know that you are among friends here. Maybe pull the covers up a little tighter, and if there's a bowl of water nearby, please, whatever you do, don't drink it. Why would anyone set 2 cigarettes at every place setting, at a meal where smoking was strictly forbidden? Why couples were seated apart on the theory that they could talk at home? What exactly happened when the women stood up and left the room so the men could get serious? Who decided 13 guests was a catastrophe, but 14 was fine? Why the correct hostess gift was flowers you weren't allowed to bring to the door? And what unspeakable thing occurred when a guest reached for the wrong fork? Congratulations. You are now a housewife in suburban America, 1965. There is a roast in the oven you have been guarding like a national treasure. There is a shrimp suspended, mid-swim, in lime gelatin on your counter, and your first guests are arriving in exactly 40 minutes, which means your evening, your reputation, and the fragile piece of your marriage now rest on whether the soup is hot. Good luck. You are sitting at the kitchen table with a fountain pen and a box of cream-coloured cards, and you are deciding who deserves to eat in your dining room. This is not a casual decision. The guest list for a 1960s dinner party is a strategic document, balanced by rank, by profession, by who owes whom, and by which 2 people cannot be in the same room without an incident. You write each name in the third person, on good paper, in ink, and you do not make mistakes, because there is no second card. Start with the debts. Every household keeps a quiet ledger of dinners eaten and dinners owed, and yours is overdue. The Pearsons had you in October, the Abbotts had you twice. You are not throwing a party so much as settling accounts, one roast at a time, and the ledger does not forgive and does not forget. Then the feuds. You have to seat 14 adults in one room for 3 hours, and at least 2 of them stop speaking after a disagreement about a fence. So you hold them apart in your mind the way you would hold 2 magnets the wrong way round, feeling the push, adjusting, feeling it again. A guest list is half arithmetic and half diplomacy, and you are the entire foreign service. The card itself has opinions about how it should be filled out. It wants the third person. It wants your name and your husband's name rendered formally, as though the 2 people who argue about the thermostat are in fact a small embassy issuing a communique. Mrs. Caldwell requests the pleasure, not you, a more composed woman who happens to share your handwriting. Mrs. Delacroix from 2 streets over addresses her cards standing up at a slanted desk, dipping the nib after every third word so the ink never pools, and she has never in her life produced a blot. You have seen her cards. They look like they were printed by a bank. Yours are handwritten by a human being late at night, and the difference is visible, and she knows it, and she would never say so. The ink is the tyrant here. Pen commits. There is no gentle correction, no quiet second attempt on the same card, because a crossed-out name announces to the recipient that they were not your first thought, that someone else stood in that space before them, and was removed. So you write slowly, you write the way you would diffuse something, and when your hand slips on the Ellisons, you do not scribble over it. You take a fresh card and you begin the Ellisons again, and the ruined one goes in your pocket, not the wastebasket, because a servant you do not have might otherwise find it. Rank sneaks in even here, before anyone has arrived. You write the most important couple first, because they set the tone, and everyone else gets measured against them. You are ranking your friends in the privacy of your own kitchen, in permanent ink, and the terrible part is that it feels completely normal. The enemy's list is its own project. Mr. Garrison cannot sit near the Pearsons after what was said at the club, and cannot sit near the Abbotts for reasons you have never fully understood but respect completely. So you build a little quarantine into the seating before the seating even exists, holding whole friendships apart in your head like a woman spacing out cutlery. It is exhausting. It is also, you suspect, the actual point of the evening. By midnight, you have a finished stack of cards, each one addressed, each one flawless, each one a small formal lie about how effortless all of this is. You stack them. The paper is thick, creamy, and faintly expensive. You do not lick the envelopes yet, because your mouth is dry from concentration, and you would rather do that part fresh. The invitations are the easy part. You have simply decided, with a fountain pen, exactly how much every person you know is worth to you this season. Tomorrow you mail the evidence. You have mailed the invitations, and now you wait. Each card carried the letters RSVP in the lower corner, which is French, which means a reply is required, which means every guest is now obligated to write you back in the third person on their own good paper within a day or two. You check the mail slot in the morning. You check it again after lunch. A guest who fails to reply has committed one of the gravest of the minor sins, and you are keeping a mental list. The mail slot has become the most important object in the house. It sits in the front door doing nothing for 23 hours a day, and then, for one bright moment around 11, it delivers a verdict. You hover near it. You pretend to dust the hall table so you can be there when the letters drop, and the moment they land you are on them like a woman who has absolutely nothing else to do, which could not be further from the truth. The replies, when they come, are little performances of their own. A proper acceptance mirrors the invitation exactly. Mr. and Mrs. Ferris accept with pleasure. Not thanks. Sounds fun. Mr. and Mrs. Ferris, in the third person, as though they too are a small embassy, cabling their intentions across 2.5 miles of suburb. Mrs. Ostrander replies, "The very afternoon your card arrives, by return post, her acceptance written in a hand so upright it looks like it is standing at attention. She addresses the envelope, blots it, walks it to the box on the corner, and drops it in before her tea has cooled. You have received her reply before some of your other guests have finished reading the invitation. She is not showing off. She is simply incapable of owing anyone a response, and it radiates off her like heat off a stove. Then there are the silent ones. The Whitmores have your card. You know they have your card, because you watch the mailman, and the mailman is reliable, and yet no reply comes. Not the next day. Not the day after. The silence begins to take on a texture, a specific weight, the particular dread of a hostess who has planned for 12 and may be cooking for 10. It is thick, patient, and faintly accusing, because that is the real cruelty of the reply system. You cannot plan the roast, the table, the seating, or the 14th guest problem until you know your number, and your number is being held hostage by people who have not yet gotten around to walking to the mailbox. The whole evening is downstream of these little cards, and the little cards are late. You consider telephoning. You do not telephone. Chasing a guest for a reply is its own breach, a way of admitting you have been sitting by the door counting, which you have, but which cannot be shown. So you wait with the specific patience of someone who is furious and gracious at the same time, and you file the delay away in the ledger, where it will quietly affect whether the Whitmores are asked again in the spring. By the 4th day, the numbers settle. Everyone accepts, the Whitmores replying last, with a scrawl that suggested the whole business had slipped their mind entirely, which it clearly had. You count the guests one more time to be sure. 12, plus you and your husband, a full table of 14. You set your jaw and feel that particular mix of triumph and dread, but that is a problem for tomorrow. Tonight you have your list, written in other people's handwriting, and the party has officially become real. Somewhere out there a dozen guests have marked your name on their calendar, and you have marked all of theirs in a different, less forgiving place. You open Amy Vanderbilt to the chapter on formal dinners, and you begin to plan the courses. A proper dinner is not a plate of food. It is a sequence. Soup, then fish, then an entree, then the roast, then salad, then dessert, then coffee, with the option of a small icy sorbet in the middle to refresh the palate. Each course arrives separately. Each course has its own rules. You are planning 7 acts of a play, and you are the writer, the director, and the entire kitchen staff. The book does not know that you have no kitchen staff. The book is very clear on this point in the way that it is clear on all points, which is to say it assumes a butler and possibly a footman are standing just out of frame, waiting to carry the fish. Amy Vanderbilt mentions these people the way you might mention the weather, as a settled fact of life, and you read the sentence in a house where the only other staff member is a dishwasher that leaks. So you translate. Every instruction written for a household with servants has to be quietly rewritten for a household with you. The book says the fish is cleared and the entree is brought. You read, "You will stand up, carry 14 fish plates to the kitchen, and return with 14 entree plates, twice, smiling, in heels, while maintaining a conversation you can barely hear over your own heartbeat." The sorbet is where you draw the line. A small, icy palate cleanser served between the heavy courses to reset the mouth for the roast. It is elegant. It is also an entire additional course requiring an entire additional round of dishes produced solely so that people can taste the roast slightly better, and you are cooking this meal alone. The sorbet is cut. The book will never know. Mrs. Halloran, who hosts on the next block and has hosted for 20 years, taught you the real curriculum, the one that lives in the margins. Do the soup the night before. Choose an entree that survives sitting in a warm oven. Never, ever attempt a dish you have not made twice already, because a dinner party is not the place to meet a recipe for the first time. She tapped the page as she said it. Once, like a judge with a gavel. The roast is the fixed star. Everything else in the menu orbits it. It has to be meat, it has to be impressive, and it has to be the thing people remember, so you build the rest of the courses around protecting it, timing it, giving it the oven at the exact hour it needs. The soup and the fish are, in a sense, just the opening acts keeping the audience busy while the star warms up backstage. You write the menu out on a card, course by course, the way the book wants. Reading it back, it looks like the itinerary of a small ocean voyage. The plan is long, formal, and quietly impossible. There are exactly 7 recognized courses on it, and quietly dropping one is a small confession. 7 stops, several hours. A real risk of someone getting sick. Then you make the second list, the honest one, the battle plan. What can be done Thursday? What must be done Saturday morning? What cannot be touched until the guests are actually in the door and the oven is already committed? This list does not go on a nice card. This list is written on the back of an envelope in a hand that gets less elegant toward the bottom. By the end, you have a menu fit for a mansion and a plan for a woman working alone, stapled together into one evening. The book gave you the acts. You had to figure out how one person plays every part and still gets to sit down. 7 courses. 1 cook. You circle the roast on the card, because the roast is the only thing here you are truly afraid of. You are pushing a cart through the supermarket with a list that assumes you are feeding 14 adults, their most impressive meal of the season. Ground beef is 63 cents a pound, eggs are 57 cents a dozen. A whole roast, the mandatory centerpiece of any dinner that matters, is the single most expensive thing in the cart. The food itself is cheap. A week of groceries costs under $20. What is expensive is the standard, and the standard does not appear on any price tag in this store. The list rules the trip. You wrote it against the menu card aisle by aisle, and it does not care that your feet already hurt. Cream for the soup. Something respectable from the fish counter. Lettuce firm enough to survive a gelatin salad landing on it. The list is long and specific and reads, to a stranger glancing over your shoulder, like the shopping of a woman who has help at home. The butcher is the real appointment. You do not simply grab a roast off the shelf. You go to the counter, and you stand there while Mr. Petrakis leans over the glass and helps you choose. He knows what you are doing. He always knows. He weighs a cut in one hand, shakes his head, slides it back, and pulls another, holding it up under the light so you can both approve of it, the way 2 people might inspect a hat. He wraps it in white paper, tucks the fold under with one thumb, and writes the price on the outside in grease pencil. That number is the whole budget bending around a single piece of beef. The cans are the quiet secret. You load in the cream of mushroom soup, the little tins of vegetables, the packet of dehydrated onion soup that will become a dip nobody suspects came from a packet. None of this will be admitted at the table. The cans will be transformed, plated, and presented as though they came from hours at the stove, and the grocery receipt is the only witness that will ever say otherwise. You will hide the receipt the way other people hide letters. The arithmetic runs in your head the whole time. Beef, up. 2 extra place settings worth of everything, up. The good coffee for after dinner, up. Because serving bad coffee at the end undoes the whole evening in 1 cup. You add as you walk. The total is small by any later standard, and enormous by the standard of your actual weekly envelope, which has to stretch across all 7 other days too. At the register, the girl rings it through fast, and the number lands, and you pay it without a flicker, because a flicker would be a confession. A woman entertaining well does not appear to notice the cost of entertaining well. You count the change into your purse, snap it shut, and load the bags into the trunk yourself, which the etiquette book somehow never mentions. Mrs. Halloran told you the truth about this too. "It is never the food that breaks you," she said, wheeling her own cart past yours in the parking lot, one gloved hand resting on a bag of flour like it was a small dog. "It is the roast, the coffee, and your pride, in that order." Then she drove off, and you stood there knowing she was exactly right. The cheap part is the beef and the eggs and the bread. The expensive part is invisible. It is the pressure to make $20 of ingredients look like a fortune, and to do it so smoothly that no one ever guesses how little it cost or how much it took. You drive home with the roast-riding shotgun, wrapped in paper, worth more than everything else in the car combined. You do not let it slide around on the turns. It is the afternoon before the party, and you are sitting at the table with a jar of polish, a soft cloth, and every piece of sterling silver you own. You rub each fork, each spoon, each serving piece until it throws back the light. Tarnished silver at a formal table is a confession, and you are not confessing anything tonight. Your fingers go black. The polish smells sharp and chemical. There are more forks than there are guests, and every single one of them must be spotless before the doorbell rings. The silver comes out of its felt-lined box like a family that only assembles for funerals and holidays. Most of it has not been touched since the last party. It sat in the dark, growing a faint grey film, quietly, on its own schedule, the way silver does the moment you stop looking at it. Silver is loyal in exactly one way and treacherous in every other. Leave it alone and it will embarrass you, on purpose, at the worst possible time, so you go piece by piece. Dab, rub, turn, rub the other side. Buff until the grey lifts and the metal underneath flashes back at you. Each piece ends up bright, clean, and absurdly perfect. The polish smells like a science experiment and dries to a chalky bloom that you then have to wipe away, which means every fork is handled 3 separate times before it is allowed to lie down on the towel. You count them as you finish. You lose count. You count again. The absurdity arrives around the 11th fork. You are polishing more forks than there are people, because each guest gets a fish fork and a salad fork and a dinner fork, and somewhere in this pile is a small pronged thing whose only job in life is oysters, which you are not even serving. You are shining a specialized oyster fork for a menu with no oysters on your one afternoon, because the setting looks incomplete without it. You buff it anyway. It gleams, uselessly, magnificently. Your Aunt Marguerite could have done this in half the time. She had a system, learned in a house, that once had staff, and she polished with 2 cloths, one for the polish and one for the buff, never crossing them, working the tines with a corner of the rag wrapped over one finger so no gap went dark. You watched her do it as a girl. You are doing it slower and worse and with only one cloth, and you can feel her, somewhere, mildly disappointed. Your hands are the casualty. The polish works its way under your nails and into the creases of your knuckles, turning them a stubborn grey no amount of dish soap fully removes, which means tonight you will be greeting your guests and pouring their drinks with hands that have been doing exactly what you have been doing. You will keep them moving. You will hope the candlelight is kind. There is a strange intimacy in it, though. Alone at the table with 100 pieces of metal rubbing each one awake. The serving spoon your mother gave you. The little butter knives that came from the wedding. The whole silent history of the household, laid out and made to shine for 14 people who will use it for 3 hours and never once think about where it sleeps. By the time the light goes gold in the window, you have a table full of silver throwing that light back in every direction, and hands that look a decade older than the rest of you. You wrap each piece loosely so it does not tarnish again overnight, because it would, given the chance. It is always given the chance. You stand up. Your back has a strong opinion about the afternoon. The silver, at least, has nothing left to confess. You unfold the white damask cloth over the dining table, and you begin to measure the overhang. The rule is 18 inches. Not 12. Not 24. 18 inches of cloth hanging over the edge on all 4 sides, which means you are walking around the table with your hands tugging and smoothing, checking that the drop is even everywhere. The cloth must be stark white and unblemished. No stain, no crease you cannot iron out. You have already ironed it once. You will iron it again once it is on the table. The cloth is enormous and has a will of its own. It comes off the shelf folded into a dense white brick, and the moment you shake it open, it wants to be a sail, catching the air, draping itself over chairs and the back of the sofa and you. Wrestling it flat onto the table is a two-person job that you are doing with one person. You billow it up, you let it settle, and then you begin the slow negotiation of getting it centered so all 4 drops match. 18 inches is the law, and the law does not explain itself. Somewhere in the last century, someone decided that this exact length of hanging cloth separated a civilized table from a barbaric one, and the number was written down, and now it is simply true. Too short, and the table looks underdressed. Too long, and it pools on the floor like the cloth is melting. 18 inches, and you are checking it with the side of your hand, which is roughly, you have decided, about right. The crease is the enemy. The cloth was folded, which means it arrives with a hard white ridge running down its spine, a line the overhead light will catch and betray the instant the room dims, and the candles come up. So you fetch the iron and you press it flat right there on the table, working the point into the fold, chasing the ridge across the whole surface. Steam rises. The cloth goes smooth. You find another crease. Of course you do. White is a colour chosen by someone who was not going to be eating. Stark, unblemished white, on a table that will shortly host red wine, brown gravy, a wobbling gelatin salad, and 14 adults with their guards down. The cloth is pristine for exactly one reason, which is so that its ruin later will be more total. You know this. You lay the perfect white cloth anyway, because tonight it is armour, and its job is to look untouched at the exact moment the doorbell rings. Missus. Halloran keeps a thick felt pad under her cloth, she told you once, tapping the table for emphasis. It softens the sound of the plates, protects the wood, and makes even a cheap cloth hang like money. You do not have the felt. You make a mental note about the felt. The note joins a long list of things you will do properly next time, a list that has never once been consulted. With the cloth down and pressed and centered, you step back to the doorway to check it from the angle a guest will see, because that angle is the only one that counts. From here it looks like a frozen lake, flat, white, and impossibly smooth, and for 1 second the dining room looks like the photograph in the book instead of the room where your family argues about television. Then you see it. A faint grey smudge near the head of the table, from a silver polishing hand you thought you had washed. You lean in. You lick your thumb, you rub, and it lifts, thank God, because there is no second cloth either. 18 inches, all around, flawless white. You have dressed the table before you have dressed yourself, and the table, honestly, is ahead of schedule. You are placing the silver, and the silver has a law. Everything is laid in the order it will be used, working from the outside of the setting inward toward the plate. 3 forks to the left, knives and spoons to the right, with a little oyster fork tucked across the spoons like an afterthought. A guest is expected to start from the outside and work in, matching each implement to its course without looking down. You are building a small test at every seat, and later tonight, someone is going to fail it. The logic is beautiful and completely insane at the same time. Each course, from the outside in, gets its own tool, so a guest who simply reaches for the farthest left fork and works steadily inward will always, automatically, be correct. The system is designed so that anyone raised inside it never has to think. It is also designed so that anyone raised outside it is exposed the moment they hesitate, hand hovering, doing the math the system was built to hide. You space them by eye, and the spacing matters. The forks stand shoulder to shoulder in a neat row, tines up, evenly gapped, the salad fork and the fish fork and the dinner fork each in their appointed place. A crooked line-up reads as carelessness. So you nudge them, a 1/16 of an inch here, a hair there, until the row looks less like flatware and more like a small honor guard standing at parade rest along the edge of the plate. The row stands straight, even, and quietly menacing. The oyster fork is the joke that keeps giving. There it lies, again, laid across the bowls of the spoons because it has no proper rank of its own, a tiny 3-tined creature the whole setting has to make room for. You are not serving oysters. You have never once served oysters. But the setting has an appointed slot for it, and an empty slot looks worse than a pointless fork, so the pointless fork goes down, at every place, 14 times, gleaming with the effort of this afternoon. By the strict count, there are exactly 7 acceptable pieces of silver at a formal place. Mr. Petrakis at the butcher counter would look at this table and see madness, and he would be right. But the people coming tonight will read it fluently. They will sit, glance down once, and know exactly how the evening is going to run, because the silver is a schedule written in metal. Soup first, the far spoon says. Fish next, the odd fork answers. The table has already told them the whole plan before you have said a word. Your cousin Delia married into a family that entertained seriously, and she confessed to you once, in a low voice at a wedding, that in her first month she practiced place settings on her own kitchen table with a diagram torn from a magazine, laying and relaying the same 8 forks until her hands knew the order without her. She said it the way other people confess to something shameful. You understood completely. You have the diagram too. There is a cruelty folded into the elegance, and you feel it as you lay the last fork. This is a test that only tests where a person came from. The food does not taste better eaten with the correct fork. The salad is unharmed by the wrong one. You step back. 14 identical little arsenals, laid out with parade ground precision, each one bristling with tools for courses you may or may not even serve. Somewhere out there, one of your guests is going to reach past the fish fork tonight and pick up the wrong one first. You already know it, and the rules will require you to pretend you did not see. You are holding a diagram of your own dining table, and you are assigning every human being a coordinate. The lady of highest rank goes to your husband's right, the next highest to his left. The most important man sits at your right hand. Rank spirals outward from the heads of the table, so the closer a guest sits to you, the more you have decided they matter, and everyone at the party will be able to read exactly where they landed. You are ranking your friends, in ink, and they will notice. The diagram is a little battlefield. You have drawn the table as an oval and marked the 2 heads, yours and your husband's, and now you are placing tokens, moving them, second-guessing, moving them back. The rule gives you the anchors. The right hand of the host is the throne. The next seat down is a slightly lesser throne. From there, the honour bleeds away toward the middle of the table, where the least important people sit facing each other over the centrepiece, quietly aware of it. Rank is the problem, because rank is not written anywhere. In an official house, you would seat by title and be done. Here you have to invent the hierarchy yourself out of raw suburban material, whose husband is senior at the firm, who is oldest, who is technically the guest of honour, who would be wounded by the wrong chair and who would never notice. You are a small woman with a pencil deciding the pecking order of people who believe they are all equals, and the pencil does not get to be wrong. The couples get split, and that rule at least is a mercy disguised as a rule. Husband and wife are never seated together, on the stated theory that they can talk at home, which is both completely true and quietly hilarious. So you pull each pair apart and scatter them across the oval, which means everyone spends the evening making conversation with someone else's spouse, which is, you suspect, the entire secret engine of the dinner party. Nobody is allowed to relax into the person they came with. Mrs. Ostrander, the woman who replied to your invitation before her tea cooled, will read this seating like a ledger the instant she walks in. She always does. She will find her place card, register precisely how far from the host she has been placed, and calculate her standing to the inch. And whatever she concludes will be filed away in a mind that files everything. You seat her carefully. You seat her honestly. You do not seat her one place lower than she expects, because you are not brave enough and you have to see her at the market. The centre seats are where you put the safe people, the ones who will not count. Your dearest friend, the one you actually want to talk to, ends up marooned in the low middle precisely because she loves you and will forgive you and will not measure the distance. It is a strange tax on affection. The people you like best get the worst chairs, because they are the only ones you trust not to mind. You run the diagram 3 times to be sure no feud sits within arm's reach and no ego sits below its station. It holds. It is a small, ugly, and brilliant triumph of engineering, a seating plan, an HOA and place cards that keeps a dozen tender vanities from touching, drawn at a kitchen table by a woman who will herself sit wherever is left over. Because that is the last twist. The hostess does not get an honoured seat. You get the spot nearest the kitchen, the working seat, the one that lets you rise unnoticed to fetch the next course. You have ranked everyone in the room and quietly ranked yourself dead last, by design, because the person running the machine does not get to sit in the good part of it. You set the diagram aside. Tomorrow it becomes place cards, and the place cards make it real, and there is no taking it back after that. A regret arrives by telephone the night before, and now you count the places at your table again, and you get 13, and you feel your stomach drop. 13 at a table is not done. It has never been done. A superstition older than anyone at the party says that a table of 13 invites disaster, and a proper hostess simply does not seat that number. So now you have a decision. You either leave a chair empty which looks like a death, or you find a 14th body, a spare guest whose entire function at your party is to not be the 13th person. The regret came from Mr. Raidmaker, your husband's colleague, a bachelor, calling to say a cold had turned into something that would keep him home. He was apologetic. He was also, without meaning to be, a small catastrophe, because he was your 14th, the odd single man who balanced the count, and his empty chair has just pulled the whole table down to the cursed number. You did not invent this fear, and you cannot reason your way out of it. The superstition is centuries deep, older than the house, older than the country, and it does not care that you are a modern woman with a modern oven. A table of 13 is simply understood to be tempting something, and you are raised to believe that a hostess who seats 13 has failed at a level below manners, somewhere down in the foundations. So the hunt begins, and it is undignified. You need one more warm body by tomorrow evening, someone presentable, someone who can sit at a formal table and hold a fork correctly and make conversation with a stranger's wife, and who is, crucially, free on a few hours' notice. This person exists in every social circle. He has a name that everyone recognizes and no one quite remembers to invite first. He is the spare man, and every hostess keeps a mental list of them like a woman keeping matches in a drawer. He is pleasant, available, and endlessly replaceable. You telephone your cousin Delia, who knows everyone, and you ask the question in the careful language these things require. Not, "I am desperate," and it is the night before. Instead, you wonder aloud whether her neighbour, the pleasant widower who plays bridge, might enjoy a small dinner tomorrow. Delia understands instantly. Delia has made this call herself. She says she will ask, and 20 minutes later she rings back with a yes. And you could weep with relief over a man you have met exactly twice. His name is Mr. Ainsley, and he has just been drafted into a party he did not know existed to solve a problem he will never be told about. He will arrive tomorrow believing he was wanted. In a sense, he was. He was wanted with a specific, mathematical urgency that has nothing to do with him and everything to do with the gap between 12 and 14, and he will never suspect that his entire purpose is to occupy the space where disaster would otherwise sit, Mrs. Halloran, when you confess the whole scramble to her over the fence, does not laugh. She nods, slowly, like a general hearing a familiar battle described. "Always keep 2 spare men in your pocket," she says. "One of them will always have a cold." Then she goes back to her roses, having delivered the single most useful thing anyone has told you all week. You redo the seating in your head, sliding Mr. Ainsley into Mr. Raidmaker's old coordinate, adjusting the ranks a hair on either side. The table is 14 again. The curse is lifted, or rather, the curse has been fed a substitute, which is apparently how these things are handled. You sit down for the first time all day. 13 would have been unthinkable. 14, bought at the last minute from a cousin's bridge circle, is somehow completely fine. You are writing tiny names on tiny folded cards, one for each seat, because any dinner of more than 6 people requires place cards. The stated reason is order. Without cards, guests would hover behind chairs, negotiating, deferring, performing a small awkward dance of who sits where while the soup goes cold. The cards end the dance. They also lock in the seating you spent an hour deciding, which means no one can quietly move themselves up the table. You set each card at its place, and the table is now a map of your judgment. The cards are small and demand a small hand. You are writing names in a script tinier than your normal writing, centered on a folded rectangle no bigger than a matchbook, and every letter has to be legible from standing height because a guest reads their card from above, not up close. Mr. Ainsley, Mrs. Ostrander. Your husband, rendered formally, at the far head. You blot each one and stand it up like a little tent, and the row of them along the cloth looks like a village of very serious paper houses. They stand mute, patient, and quietly final. The honorific is a decision every time, Doctor or Mister. first name or not, a woman by her husband's name, or her own. Each card is a tiny ruling on exactly how you see a person, printed and displayed for that person to find, and there is no softening it once it stands on the cloth. You get Mrs. Ostrander's card exactly right, because Mrs. Ostrander will read hers the way a customs officer reads a passport, slowly, looking for the error. And here is the quiet magic of the little tents. They do the cruel work so you do not have to. You are not standing at the door announcing that the widower ranks below the doctor and above the cousin. The cards say it for you, silently, in your own polite handwriting, so that the whole hierarchy you agonized over lands as if it simply fell from heaven fully formed. No one argues with a place card. You cannot argue with furniture. Mrs. Halloran told you the rule that guests never say aloud, which is that you do not move your card. You may think the seating is wrong. You may believe you belong 3 chairs closer to the host. You sit where the card says, because moving it is a small act of war, a public correction of the hostess in her own dining room, and it is remembered for years. The cards are obeyed the way traffic lights are obeyed, by people who have simply agreed not to die today. There is always the temptation, and you feel it now, to nudge one card, to put your dearest friend a little higher than her rank strictly allows as a secret kindness. You resist it, barely, because Mrs. Ostrander would notice the anomaly and file it, and the kindness would cost your friend more in scrutiny than it gave her in honour. So your friend stays in her low, safe seat, honoured only in your heart, which she cannot read from standing height. You walk the table, setting each card above its plate, and as you go, the abstract diagram from last night becomes real, name by name, chair by chair. This is the moment the party stops being a plan and becomes a room that will contain specific people in a specific order. You can almost hear them already. The scrape of chairs, the small relieved sounds of people finding their names and sitting where they are told. The last card is your own. You write your name small and set it at the working seat by the kitchen door, the one you assigned yourself, and seeing it there in your own hand makes the whole arrangement feel oddly official, like signing a document. The table is now governed. 14 little paper houses, each holding a person in place, each one a decision you will not have to defend out loud. You turn off the dining room light. The cards keep their posts in the dark. The guests arrive in an hour, and now it is your turn. You pull on the girdle, you set your hair and lock it in place with a cloud of aerosol spray that stings your eyes and coats the back of your throat. You choose gloves, a dress that does not wrinkle, a fresh coat of lipstick applied last so it stays perfect. You're assembling a version of yourself who looks like she has been relaxing all afternoon, when in fact you have been polishing forks and measuring a tablecloth. The girdle comes first, and the girdle sets the terms. It is not clothing so much as infrastructure, a firm, elastic scaffolding that holds you in a shape the dress requires, and once it is on, you breathe differently, sit differently, and reach for high shelves like a woman who has made peace with certain limitations. You will wear it for 6 hours. You will forget it is there for exactly none of them. Then the hair, which is its own small industry. You have set it, pinned it, and now you seal it with hairspray, holding the can at arm's length and turning slowly inside a fine chemical mist that settles on the mirror, the counter, and the back of your throat. The smell is sweet and faintly toxic and completely familiar. When you are done, your hair does not move. It could survive weather. It has the structural confidence of a helmet and roughly the give of one. The dress was chosen days ago for a single quality above all others, which is that it does not wrinkle when you sit, and rise again 100 times to fetch courses. Beauty is secondary. Endurance is the specification. It has to look composed at 8 o'clock and still look composed at 11, after you have carried 14 soup bowls and knelt to find a dropped fork, and very few dresses can promise that, so the one that can gets the job. The gloves are the finishing touch and the small tyranny. They go on last, smoothed up the forearm, and they transform your polished greyed hands into the hands of a lady who has never touched a jar of silver polish in her life. You flex your fingers inside them and remember, with a small sinking feeling, that you will have to manage their removal gracefully at the table later, a whole separate performance waiting for you. Lipstick goes on absolutely last, after everything else that might smudge it, applied in the mirror with the steadiness of a surgeon. It is the seal on the whole construction. Once the lipstick is on, the transformation is complete, and the tired woman who spent the day on her knees behind the sofa is gone, replaced by someone serene, someone rested, Someone who could not possibly have measured a tablecloth to the inch this afternoon. Your daughter watches from the doorway of the bedroom, too young to be at the party, fascinated by the ritual, and asks why you are painting your face. You tell her you are getting ready for company, and she asks why company means a different face, and you do not have a good answer, so you hand her the empty lipstick tube to play with and send her back down the hall. She toddles off cradling it like treasure. It is the truest question anyone will ask all night. You look in the mirror one last time. The woman looking back is calm, pressed, sealed, and entirely convincing. Nothing about her suggests the last 8 hours. That is the point. The whole day of labour has to vanish into an hour of assembly, so that when the doorbell rings, you can open it looking like a woman to whom all of this comes easily. The clock says 40 minutes. You go down to check the roast, in the good dress, in the gloves you will regret. You are stocking the bar cart, and you are trying to remember what everyone drinks. The gin, the vermouth, the whiskey for the old fashions and the Manhattans, ice in the silver bucket. A hostess is expected to know, without asking, that one man takes scotch and another wants a martini very dry, and to have offered the right glass to the right hand before anyone has to request it. You are building a memory palace of other people's preferences, and you will be quizzed on it live, starting the moment the first coat comes off. The cart itself is a piece of theatre on wheels. Bottles arranged by height, labels turned out, the good glasses polished and waiting, a little dish of olives, a bowl of ice sweating gently in its silver bucket. The cart looks abundant, careless, and staged. It is meant to look like abundance casually assembled, which is why you have spent 20 minutes arranging the casualness. A bar cart that looks fussed over defeats its own purpose, so you fuss over making it look unfussed. The glasses are a language you have to speak fluently. The martini wants its own stemmed glass. The old-fashioned wants a heavy tumbler you can build the drink inside. The highball wants a tall one. Serve a Manhattan in the wrong glass and no one will say a word, but a certain kind of guest will notice, and noticing is the whole sport of the evening. So you line the glasses up by type, a little regiment of shapes, each waiting for the drink that belongs to it. Then comes the memory work, which is the real burden. You have to know that Mr. Ferris wants his scotch neat and will wince at ice, that Mrs. Ostrander takes exactly one Manhattan and nurses it like evidence, that your husband's colleague drinks his martini so dry it is essentially a chilled threat. None of this can be asked aloud, because asking reveals that you forgot, and a hostess who forgets a man's drink has told him something about his importance to her that she did not mean to say. The drinks are sorted by sex with the confidence of a filing system. The men reach for the brown liquor, the scotch and the bourbon and the martinis, the drinks that signal seriousness and capacity. The lighter, sweeter, prettier things drift toward the women. A sidecar, something with a blush of pink, a glass that photographs well. You did not write these rules and you cannot break them tonight, so you stock for both armies and keep the assignments straight in your head. Missus. Halloran naturally has a system for this too. She keeps a little card tucked in the back of the cart, she confided, with each regular guest's drink noted beside their name, and she consults it in the 2 seconds she has her back to the room reaching for the gin. Nobody has ever caught her. Nobody ever will. It is, she says, the difference between a hostess who seems to remember everything and a hostess who actually has to. You resolve to make a card. You will forget to make the card. The ice is the enemy of time. It is perfect now, cracking and clear in the bucket, and it is already, quietly, beginning to die. By the time the guests arrive, it will be softer. By the second round, it will be swimming. You cannot make ice earlier and you cannot make it later, so you make it now and race the melt. One more thing that has to be timed against a doorbell that will ring exactly when it chooses. You wheel the cart to its spot near the living room, where the cocktail hour will happen, angled so a man can reach it without quite seeming to help himself. Everything is ready. The bottles gleam, the glasses wait, the olives sit in their little dish like green punctuation. You run the guest list in your head one more time, matching each name to its drink like a woman studying for an exam she will take standing up, in heels, holding a shaker. You are assembling the cocktail hour food, and you have discovered that the entire decade runs on the toothpick. You wrap chicken livers in bacon and spear them. You spear the little sausages. You spear cubes of cheese and pineapple and cocktail onions. Anything small enough to be lost is speared, frilled, and arranged on a platter so a guest can eat it standing up with a drink in the other hand. You are not cooking so much as constructing dozens of tiny 2-bite monuments, each one balanced on a single wooden pick. The bacon-wrapped livers are the flagship, and they are more work than the roast. Each liver has to be trimmed, wrapped in a half strip of bacon, secured with a pick, and broiled until the bacon crisps without the liver turning to shoe leather. You make 30 of them. Your fingers are slick with bacon fat and you have stabbed yourself twice on the picks. And every single one has to look identical, because a platter of matching little parcels reads as competence, and a platter of ragged ones reads as panic. The toothpick has quietly taken over the room. Everything that can be speared is speared, on the apparent theory that food a guest can lift with 2 fingers, eat in 1 bite, and dispose of on a single pick is the pinnacle of civilized snacking. Cheese cubes wear picks. Melon wears picks. A cocktail onion, a thing already the size of a marble, gets its own tiny lance. You are impaling an entire buffet, one morsel at a time, and the picks come with little coloured cellophane frills so that even the spearing is dressed up. The cheese ball sits at the centre of it all, warm and slightly greasy, rolled in chopped walnuts, radiating a kind of dense confidence. It is the sun around which the crackers orbit. You made it this morning and let it come to room temperature, and now it sags very slightly on its plate, holding its shape the way a thing holds its shape only just barely, like a snowman at the exact edge of the afternoon. The dip is the great secret of the age, and you are in on it. A packet of dehydrated onion soup, stirred into a carton of sour cream, left to sit an hour so the dried onion softens and the whole thing tastes like it took effort. It took no effort. It took a spoon, and yet it will vanish faster than anything else you make tonight, scooped up on ridged potato chips by people who would be scandalized to learn it came from a foil packet. You will let them stay scandalized. That is the deal, Mrs. Delacroix, the woman with the bank-printed invitations, apparently arranges her speared food in concentric rings by colour, working from the outside in, and finishes the platter with a single sprig of parsley placed dead centre with a pair of tweezers. You heard this and did not fully believe it until you heard it twice. You do not own tweezers for parsley. You arrange yours in rough rows and trust the candlelight, which forgives a great deal. The whole point of the cocktail food, you understand as you spear the last sausage, is that it must be eaten one-handed, standing, mid-conversation, without a plate, because the cocktail hour is a standing event, and both hands are otherwise occupied, one with a drink and one with a cigarette. The food has to survive being handled by people who are not really paying attention to it. So it is small, it is sturdy, and it is mounted, like a series of tiny trophies, on the humble wooden pick that holds the whole decade together. You carry the platters out and set them where the standing crowd will graze. 30 little bacon parcels, a walnut-crusted planet, a bowl of secret dip. It looks like abundance. It looks, if you squint, effortless. You pick a stray toothpick off the floor, where it has fallen point up, waiting for a bare foot. There is always one. There is always exactly one. You are standing at the counter with a copper mould in your hands, and inside it, suspended in trembling lime gelatin, are shrimp, sliced olives, and a hard-boiled egg. This is a salad. In 1965, it is a sophisticated salad, and unmoulding it cleanly onto a bed of iceberg lettuce is a genuine skill. You dip the mould in warm water for exactly the right count. You invert it over the plate. You hold your breath. Either it slides out whole and glistening, or it does not, and there is no third option that anyone wants to see. Gelatin is the height of taste this year, and no one can quite explain why. Somewhere, it was decided that food suspended inside a wobbling translucent dome signaled sophistication, that a shrimp frozen mid-swim in green jelly was more refined than a shrimp simply sitting on a plate, and the entire entertaining class agreed at once. So here you are, encasing perfectly good seafood inside a chilled, quivering planet, because to serve it any other way would look like you were not trying. The suspended things are the whole art of it. The shrimp have to hover at different heights. The olive slices have to float like little dark moons. The egg has to sit centered and proud, and none of them can be allowed to sink to the bottom while the gelatin sets. This requires layering, chilling each stratum until it is tacky, then adding the next, a process of geological patience that you began last night and finished at an hour you would rather not admit. The salad has been setting longer than some of your guests have been married. The unmoulding is the moment of truth, and it cannot be rushed or repeated. Warm water, but not hot, because hot melts the surface to slime. A count of 10, maybe 12, dipping the copper just to the rim. Then the plate on top, the flip, the held breath, and the small prayer to whatever saint governs suspended shrimp. You feel it release with a soft, reluctant sigh, a sound like a boot leaving mud, and the whole trembling green dome slides free and settles onto the lettuce, intact, glistening, obscene, magnificent. The salad sits cold, green, and faintly threatening. It jiggles when you set it down. It does not stop jiggling. It stands on its bed of iceberg, radiating a cool green confidence, quivering gently every time a footstep crosses the kitchen floor. A dessert-shaped thing that is somehow lunch, a centerpiece that judges the room by wobbling at it. You have made a salad that has a mood. You have made a salad that has presence. Your mother-in-law, who is not even coming tonight, lives in your head during this entire process, because her lime mold with the suspended cherries is legendary in the family, and yours is measured against it whether she is present or not. She once unmolded a ring so perfect it was described, by an aunt, as looking like stained glass. You have never matched it. You suspect she added something she has never disclosed. You suspect it is more gelatin than any recipe admits. The strangest part is that people will eat it, and enjoy it, or perform enjoying it, which at a dinner party amount to the same civic act. A cold, sweet, faintly savoury dome of jelly with shrimp in it is not obviously food, and yet it will be praised, and the praise will be sincere in the way that praise for a difficult accomplishment is sincere, whether or not anyone actually wants a second helping. You have made the hard thing. The hard thing is the point. You slide it into the refrigerator to hold its chill until the salad course, closing the door gently so the shelf does not jostle it. Through the glass shelves you can see it trembling faintly at the disturbance, settling, composing itself. One shrimp, near the top, is suspended in a perfect mid-swim curl, going nowhere, forever. You are absurdly proud of that shrimp. You are opening cans, and you are doing it with ceremony. The cookbook on your counter teaches you how to build an impressive dish out of canned soup, canned vegetables, and a packet of mix. Then present it as though it's simmered all day. The green bean casserole is 3 cans and some fried onions. The dip is a soup packet stirred into sour cream. You are performing Edwardian formality using ingredients that come with a pull tab, and you are expected to be judged on the result as if you had grown it yourself. The cookbook is unbothered by the contradiction. It sits open on the counter, promising elegance, then instructs you, in the same confident voice, to empty a can of cream of mushroom soup into a dish. It sees no tension between the crystal on the table and the tin opener in your hand. It has made its peace with the modern kitchen, where the goal is the appearance of the grand old meal produced by the machinery of the grand new pantry, and it expects you to make your peace with it too. The casserole is the perfect artifact of this bargain. Green beans from a can, cream of mushroom soup from a can, a splash of milk, a handful of fried onions from yet another can, stirred together and baked until it bubbles at the edges and looks, crucially, homemade. It was born in a soup company's test kitchen a decade ago, and it has colonized the American table so completely that guests now expect it, would miss it, would quietly wonder what was wrong if it failed to appear. You are cooking a corporation's invention and serving it as tradition. The great trick is the transfer. Nothing canned may be seen. The soup goes from the tin into your own mixing bowl, and the tin goes straight into the trash, buried under other trash, because a guest wandering into the kitchen must find no evidence. The dip is scooped into a cut glass bowl so its foil packet origins vanish. You are laundering food, moving it from its humble industrial containers into your good dishes so that by the time it reaches the table it has a clean history and no receipts. The cans themselves pile up in the bin with a specific tinny clatter, a sound you have come to associate with entertaining, and you press them down and cover them like a woman hiding something more serious than dinner. If the trash could talk, it would give you away completely. It knows the truth of the evening. It knows that the sophisticated spread upstairs began down here as a stack of labels and a pair of scissors and a packet you tore with your teeth. Missus. Halloran, who has no shame about any of this, told you the real rule of modern entertaining with a flat little smile over the fence. Nobody wants the truth, she said. They want the dish. Then she went inside to assemble something from 4 cans that would be described, by its eaters, as a triumph. She was right, as she is annoyingly always right, and you have stopped feeling guilty about the cans and started feeling something closer to respect for the sleight of hand. Because it is a sleight of hand, and there is a craft to it that the cookbook does not name, knowing which canned things can be dressed up and which cannot, knowing how much fresh parsley erases a multitude of tins, knowing that a heavy serving spoon and a warmed dish and your own confident face carrying it to the table will convince a room that hours went into something that took 20 minutes and a can opener. The whole dinner is quick, cheap, and convincing. You slide the casserole into the oven below the resting roast and wipe the counter clean of any trace. No labels, no packet, no tins in sight. Upstairs it will be elegant. Down here it was 3 cans and a scissors, and a woman who has learned exactly how the trick is done. The doorbell rings, and you become a different person. You open the door, you take the coats, and you accept the hostess gift with exactly the right amount of gratitude. If someone hands you flowers at the door, you are now holding flowers and a problem, because you have to find a vase and arrange them while your party begins without you. The correct guests sent flowers in advance for this exact reason. You greet each arrival by name, you steer them toward the drinks, and you do not once mention that you are already tired. The doorbell is a switch, and it flips you instantly. 1 second you are someone who has been cooking for 9 hours with grey hands and a sore back, and the next, at the sound of the chime, you are radiant, delighted, entirely at leisure, opening the door as if you had been sitting by it in a state of pleasant anticipation rather than sprinting from the oven. The transformation has to be total and immediate. No guest may ever glimpse the woman from before the doorbell. The coats come first, and coats are a logistical trap. Your guests arrive in waves, each shedding an overcoat, and you must gather them, remember whose is whose, and disappear them onto a bed somewhere without breaking the flow of greeting, all while your arms fill with wool and your smile stays fixed. You become a coat rack with a warm expression. Somewhere in the pile a fur is sliding off, and you catch it without looking, because a dropped coat is a small failure and you are not having small failures tonight. The hostess gift is its own delicate exchange. A bottle of wine, a box of candy, a small potted something, handed over with a modest word, and you receive it with a gratitude calibrated precisely to its size, warm but not overwhelmed, because too much thanks embarrasses everyone. You have received these gifts and given them, and the whole ritual is a soft little economy of acknowledgement, everyone paying a small tribute to the labour they can all see, and no one will mention. And then someone hands you flowers at the door, and your heart sinks behind your smile. Cut flowers, wrapped in paper, beautiful, and now a problem, because they need a vase, water, arranging, and you have guests arriving and a roast at a critical stage. The truly considerate guests sent their flowers this morning so that you could arrange them at leisure and display them as if by magic. Flowers at the door are a kindness that creates work, a gift that hands you a second job at the worst possible moment. Mrs. Ostrander, of course, sent hers 2 days ago, with a card, timed so they would be open but not blown by tonight, and they are sitting arranged on the hall table doing exactly the work she intended, which is reminding you that she knows the rule and honours it. Meanwhile, a well-meaning younger guest presses a cone of carnations into your hands with a proud smile, and you thank her radiantly and carry the problem toward the kitchen to find anything that holds water. The steering is the quiet art of the doorway. You cannot let guests cluster in the hall, so you greet, you relieve them of their coats, and you aim them gently toward the bar cart and the speared food, launching each one into the party like a woman pushing little boats into a current. Within minutes, the living room fills with the sound you have been working toward all day, the murmur and clink of people enjoying themselves, none of them aware of the machinery humming just behind your face. You greet the last arrival, Mr. Ainsley, your rescued 14th, who has no idea he is a rescue. You take his coat. You thank him for coming as though his coming were the most natural thing in the world. Then you carry the doorway carnations to the sink, jam them in a pitcher, and rejoin your own party 12 seconds later, radiant, rested, and lying with your whole body. Dinner is announced, and the room organizes itself into a parade. Your husband offers his arm to the most important woman present and leads her to the table first. You come last, on the arm of the most important man. Everyone else falls into line by rank, a slow choreographed procession from the living room to the dining room, arm in arm, in an order that everyone silently understands. You are walking 12 feet from one room to another, and you are doing it with the formality of a coronation because the rules say you must. The announcement itself is a small performance. You do not shout that the food is ready. You catch your husband's eye, he sets down his glass, and dinner is announced in the calm, formal phrasing the moment requires, a sentence that transforms a crowd of people holding drinks into a procession with an order and a direction. The cocktail hour ends the instant those words are spoken. The evening shifts gears, audibly, and everyone knows their part. The pairing off is where the rank you agonized over comes back to collect. Your husband offers his arm to the highest-ranking woman, not to you, because a host escorts the guest of honor, and you watch your own husband walk another woman to dinner as the most correct thing in the world. The men each find the woman assigned to them, offer an arm, and the room sorts itself into couples who are, pointedly, not the couples who arrive together. It is a reshuffling in plain sight, sanctioned by centuries. You take the arm of the most important man in the room tonight, the ranking gentleman, who offers it with grave, practiced courtesy. Somewhere ahead of you in the line is Mr. Ainsley, your rescued 14th, walking a woman he met an hour ago, unaware that he was recruited last night by telephone to make this parade add up. He is playing his small part beautifully, because he does not know it is a part. You rest your gloved hand on the ranking man's sleeve and bring up the rear of your own procession, last into the room you spent the day preparing. The distance is the absurd part. This is not a grand hall requiring a stately entrance. It is a suburban dining room roughly 12 feet from the living room sofa, and you are approaching it arm in a slow, deliberate line, as though crossing the floor of a palace toward a throne. The procession takes approximately 11 seconds. It has the ceremonial weight of something that should take an hour. The gap between the grandeur of the form and the modesty of the actual room is enormous, and everyone maintains it perfectly. The ranking woman, on the arm of your husband at the very front, processes with the bearing of a guest who has waited all evening to be escorted first, which she has. She glides. She has clearly done this her whole life and finds nothing strange in it. Behind her the line follows, arm in arm, faces composed, and for 11 seconds your ordinary living room becomes the anteroom of somewhere far more important than it is. And the couple's split matters more than it seems, because it sets the whole shape of the meal. Nobody spends dinner beside the person they are most comfortable with. Everyone is delivered, by the procession, to the side of a near stranger, which is the entire quiet design of the evening, a machine for making people talk to those they would not otherwise choose. You engineered it with a pencil last night. Now it walks itself into the room on your arm. You reach the dining room last, as you should, and release the ranking gentleman toward his card. The little paper tents wait exactly where you left them. The procession dissolves into the soft business of 14 people finding their names. You stand a moment at your working seat by the kitchen door, watching them settle into the order you built. Then you sit, and the meal, at last, begins. Everyone is seated, and the entire table is watching your hands. No one may touch their napkin until you touch yours. You're lifting the large linen square and laying it, unfolded only halfway, across your lap is the silent starting gun for the whole meal. Until you do it, 14 adults sit with their hands in their laps, waiting. You unfold the napkin. You do not tuck it into your collar. You do not shake it open with a flourish, and you make a note to remember, at the end, never to refold it. The power of the gesture is out of all proportion to the gesture. It is a woman picking up a folded piece of cloth. And yet until you do it, the meal cannot legally begin, the courses cannot come, the guests cannot lift so much as a water glass, because the table runs on your signal, and your signal is the napkin. You hold, for one strange second, the entire evening in a square of linen, and everyone at the table is pretending not to watch you decide when to drop it. So you make them wait, just slightly, not on purpose, but because you are scanning the table one last time, checking that the water is poured and the candles are steady and the first course is truly ready to come. In that pause, 14 people sit with folded hands and quiet faces, a tableau of extremely polite hostages, and the moment stretches until it is almost funny, and then you lift the napkin and release them all at once. The gesture is small, silent, and weirdly powerful. The unfolding has its own law, naturally. A large dinner napkin is opened only halfway and laid across the lap, never fully spread like a bib, never tucked into the collar like a man at a diner, never snapped open with a theatrical flourish, as though performing the act rather than simply doing it. The correct motion is small, quiet, almost invisible. You have done it 10,000 times. You do it now without looking, and around the table 14 napkins descend in a soft ripple that follows yours by half a second. There is one thing to remember for later, and you file it now so you do not forget it at the tired end of the night. You must not refold the napkin when the meal is over. A refolded napkin says you assume you will be back to use it again, an unthinkable presumption, so at the end you will lay it loosely rumpled to the left of your plate, deliberately unfinished, and the deliberate unfinishing is itself the correct finish. Manners contain these small riddles and expects you to have solved them years ago. Missus. Ostrander, to your husband's right, lays her napkin with a precision that suggests she has been timing your hands, ready to move the instant you moved and not one moment before. She would sooner starve than lift her napkin before the hostess. It is a matter of principle for her, one of the 1,000 tiny principles she carries, and you feel the small, cold pleasure of having just, correctly, gone first in your own house. In all the ranking and processing and escorting, where the host walks another woman to dinner and you enter last on a stranger's arm, this one small act restores the truth. It is your table. The meal begins when you say it begins, and you say it with a piece of cloth. The napkin settles across your lap. The starting gun has fired, silently, and the meal is now officially underway. You catch your husband's eye down the length of the table. It is time for the soup, which means it is time for you to stand up again, less than a minute after finally sitting down. The first course is soup, and it has to arrive hot, which means you have been timing the kitchen against the doorbell for the last 2 hours. You spooned it out at the last possible second so it reaches the table scalding. Now you watch 14 people tilt their bowls away from themselves and spoon outward, away from the body, sipping from the side of the spoon without a sound. The soup course is short. It is also the first real test of whether your timing holds, and there are 6 more courses waiting behind it. Hot is the whole assignment, and hot is harder than it sounds when you are the only staff. Soup announced too early sits and skins over. Soup delivered too late arrives lukewarm, and lukewarm soup is a quiet verdict on the entire kitchen. So you held it at a low flame, ladled it at the last possible instant, and carried the bowls out 2 at a time while it was still throwing steam, which means you have already made several trips before you have taken a single sip of your own. The eating of it has rules, because of course it does. The spoon moves away from you, outward across the bowl, not toward you, a motion everyone at the table performs automatically, and no one can quite explain. You sip from the side of the spoon, not the tip. You do not slurp. And when the bowl runs low, you tip it away from yourself to gather the last of it, never toward you, as though the soup must always be encouraged to flee your own body. The room stays quiet, careful, and faintly ridiculous. It is a small ballet, performed 14 times in unison, and it is completely silent. The silence is the strangest part. A room full of adults eating hot liquid produces almost no sound, because sound is the enemy here, the slurp and the clink policed out of existence by a lifetime of correction. You can hear the candles. You can hear a car pass outside. You cannot hear 14 people drinking soup, which is an eerie kind of accomplishment, a whole course consumed in a hush so complete it feels less like dinner and more like a room holding its breath together. Somewhere down the table, a spoon scrapes a bowl, and 14 people perform an instant, flawless deafness. Your own bowl mocks you gently from your place. You sit, you lift one spoonful, and Mr. Ferris to your left asks a question that requires a warm, attentive answer, so you set the spoon down to give it, and by the time you've done that finished being a gracious hostess, your soup has begun its slow slide toward the same lukewarm fate you fought so hard to spare everyone else. The hostess's soup is always the coldest soup at the table. It is a law older than the recipe. Mr. Ainsley, your rescued 14th, sips his soup with the quiet contentment of a man who did not expect to be fed this well tonight, and is not asking questions. He tilts his bowl outward with unconscious correctness, spoons away from himself, makes no sound. Whatever bridge circle produced him raised him properly. You note it with relief. A spare man who eats wrong is a risk you did not have time to assess on the telephone, and underneath the calm surface of the course, your mind is already 3 rooms ahead. The soup is going well, which means the fish must be ready to follow the instant these bowls are cleared, which means as soon as you decently can, you will rise, gather bowls, and vanish to the kitchen to launch the next act. The soup is not a course you get to enjoy. It is the first domino, and you are watching to see it fall cleanly so you can set up the next. The last spoon scrapes a bowl. Somewhere a napkin dabs a mouth. The soup has landed hot, silent, and correct. You stand up. 14 bowls to clear, fish to bring, and a full plate of your own left steaming untouched behind you. The fish arrives, and with it comes the fish fork, a specialized implement that exists for this exact course and no other. You watch each guest reach for the correct fork, the one shaped slightly differently, positioned in the lineup exactly where the fish course falls. Some of them know it on sight. Some of them hesitate, hand hovering over the silver, doing the arithmetic. You provided a dedicated tool for a single course of a single meal, and now you get to sit and observe who was raised to recognize it. The fish fork is a marvel of unnecessary specialization. It is broader than the others, with a notch or a shortened tine, shaped by some Victorian logic for the particular task of separating fish from its bones, as though the ordinary fork, which has separated food from other food for centuries, could not be trusted with a fillet. It exists so that the fish course can have its own instrument, and its own instrument exists so that the table can be one layer more elaborate than strictly any human being requires, and it functions, quietly, as a filter. A guest raised inside all this reaches for the correct fork without thought, because the rule is simply to work from the outside in, and the fish fork sits exactly where the fish course falls in the sequence. But a guest raised outside it faces a small silent test at the sight of the fish, a beat of uncertainty, a hand drifting over the lineup, and the beat is visible if you know to look for it, and everyone at a table like this knows to look for it. You watch it happen without appearing to watch anything. Most of the table takes the fish fork the way they take everything. Instantly, smoothly, and without a glance down, a whole roomful of people raised inside the code. And then a younger guest, the one who brought the doorway carnations, hesitates over the silver for a fraction of a second too long, hand hovering, and you feel the small pang of a hostess who set the trap and now has to watch someone step lightly around its edge. She recovers on her own. She reads the lineup, works out that the odd fork sitting exactly where the fish course falls must be the fish fork, and picks it up a half-beat late, but correct, and the near miss resolves in silence. No one at the table acknowledges that anything happened, because acknowledging it is the one thing the rules forbid above all. The cruelty sits right there beside the elegance, and you feel it as you always do. The fish tastes exactly the same eaten with the wrong fork. The bones come out no better for the special notch. The entire apparatus of the dedicated fish fork does nothing for the fish and everything for the sorting of the room, dividing the table silently into those who knew and those who guessed, over a course that lasts perhaps 6 minutes and will be forgotten by dessert. The fork is broad, notched, and unnecessary. A guest who takes it without looking has flashed a credential, the equivalent of a Costco card. And yet you laid that fork this afternoon, polished it, positioned it exactly, because a table without it would look incomplete, would announce that you did not know or could not afford the full setting. The fish is good, at least, delicate and hot, and it disappears under 14 forks of assorted correctness. You take 3 bites of your own between rising to check the roast's final rest and refilling a water glass down the table. The course ends. The special forks lie spent across the plates, having done their real job, which was never about the fish. You rise to clear again. The roast is waiting, and the roast forgives nothing. The main event arrives, and it is meat, because it was always going to be meat. The roast is the mandatory centerpiece of any dinner that matters, whether you are welcoming someone home, impressing your husband's colleagues, or simply proving that you can. You have been guarding its temperature all evening. It rests, it is carved, it is served, and the entire meal has been quietly building toward this single dish. If the roast is dry, nothing else you did tonight will be remembered. If it is perfect, no one will say so. The roast has been the true center of the whole day, the fixed star everything else orbited. You chose it at the butcher counter days ago, watched Mr. Petrakis wrap it in white paper, drove it home riding shotgun, so it would not slide. You have thought about its temperature more than your own comfort since noon. Every other dish was, in some sense, a supporting player keeping the audience occupied while this one warmed toward its entrance. The carving is the one job you hand away. Your husband stands at the head of the table with the long knife and the fork, and carving is his single formal duty of the evening, the one visible task the host performs while you have performed 40 invisible ones. He slices, and the room watches, and if he does it well, he is quietly credited with the whole meal, which you find you do not even resent tonight, because you are too busy watching the meat for the thing you fear most. The fear is dryness, and dryness cannot be undone. A roast held 10 minutes too long, an oven that ran hot, a rest cut short by a slow soup course, any of these turns tender into tough, and there is no sauce on earth that fully hides it. You watch the first slice fall away from the knife, and you read it the way a doctor reads an X-ray, checking the colour, the give, the faint sheen that means you got it right. It falls open pink and yielding, and something in your chest that has been clenched since morning finally lets go. The roast, for its part, takes all the credit and offers none. The gravy is your alibi and your triumph, made from the pan drippings while the roast rested, whisked smooth in the last frantic minutes before you called dinner. It carries the flavour, it hides small sins, it is the difference between meat and a meal. You made it standing at the stove in your good dress with a towel over your shoulder, one eye on the clock, and it came together glossy and dark, and it is, though no one will ever say so, genuinely excellent. Mr. Ferris takes a bite, pauses, and says the roast is wonderful, and the whole table murmurs agreement, and that is the most praise you will get, a passing word between forkfuls, because a perfect roast is simply expected. Nobody applauds the thing that was supposed to happen. A dry roast would have been discussed on the drive home for weeks. A perfect one earns a nod and a return to conversation, and you have learned to take the nod as the standing ovation it quietly is. This is the deep unfairness of the roast, and you have made your peace with it. Failure would be remembered forever, and success will be forgotten by dessert. You cannot win the roast, only avoid losing it, and tonight you have avoided losing it, which is the entire available victory. You sit with that, and it is, surprisingly, enough. The meat is right, the gravy is right, the centre held. You take a bite of your own roast, finally, sitting down for a moment while your husband carves seconds. It is good. You made it. Nobody will ever know how close it came, and that is exactly how you want it. The plates fill, the conversation rises, and the roast does its silent work of anchoring the whole evening. You let yourself, for one bite, simply be someone eating a good dinner in a nice room. You are watching drink levels around the table like a lifeguard watching swimmers. A glass that runs empty is your failure, so you signal, you refill, you keep the wine moving without ever letting it look like management. The drinks are coded too. The men reach for the scotch and the strong stuff. The lighter and sweeter drinks drift toward the women, and you are expected to know which is which, and to have remembered it from the last party. You are running an open bar from your chair, using only your eyes. The watching never stops, even while you eat, even while you talk. Part of your attention is always circling the table, taking inventory. This glass half full, that one nearly empty, the wine at the far end running low, and the moment a glass approaches the danger line you are already rising or catching your husband's eye, because a guest should never have to ask for a refill. Asking means the host failed to notice, and the whole art is to notice first, always, before the guest even feels the lack. A dry glass is a small accusation. It says the hostess was not paying attention, that she let a guest sit wanting, and it is remembered in the quiet ledger everyone keeps. So you would sooner overpour than underpour, keeping the levels topped, the bottle circulating, the table awash in a gentle, steady abundance that must look accidental, and is in fact the result of relentless invisible monitoring. You are a lighthouse that also refills drinks. The pour has to be quiet, quick, and invisible. The pouring itself has to disappear. You cannot loom over the table with a bottle like a waiter working for tips. The refill has to happen almost apologetically, a quiet lean, a soft tip of the wrist, a word of conversation covering the act so that the wine simply appears to renew itself. Done well, no one notices you doing it at all, which is the strange goal of so much of tonight, to work constantly and be seen to work never. And through it all runs the coding, the invisible map of who drinks what. The men's glasses want the heavier things refreshed, the scotch, the red wine poured generously. The women's glasses want the lighter touch. One guest is still nursing her first Manhattan, and to offer her a second would be to misread her entirely, so you leave her be, which is its own act of attention. Knowing when not to pour is as much of the skill as knowing when to. Mr. Ferris, to your left, is a study in this. He drinks his scotch at a steady, contemplative pace and would be quietly wounded to find his glass empty and unattended, so you keep half an eye on it all night, catching it at the right moment, and he never once has to signal, and he leaves believing, correctly, that he was well looked after. He will not know why the evening felt so easy. The wine does its own slow work on the table too, and you monitor that as carefully as the levels. A well-poured table loosens, warms, grows louder in the good way, the laughter coming easier as the evening softens. Your job is to keep it in that warm middle band, generous but never sloppy, because a table that tips too far is as much your failure as a table left dry. You refill the water for the ones slowing down on wine, because that too is your job, reading who needs pushing and who needs pacing. The table hums along in its warm, loosened state, exactly where you want it. Not one guest has had to ask for a thing. Not one of them knows how hard that is. You take a small sip of your own wine, the first in a while, and go back to watching the glasses. At each place, next to the silver, sits a small silver ashtray, and beside it, laid ready, are 2 cigarettes. And yet the rule is that no one smokes during the meal. Smoking between courses signals impatience, which is rude, so the cigarettes sit there through all 7 courses, present and forbidden at the same time. Only later, when the coffee comes, does the smoking begin. You have set the table with the tools of a habit your own etiquette bans for most of the evening, and everyone understands the arrangement perfectly. The little ashtrays are polished silver, part of the setting, laid this afternoon along with the forks and the water glasses. Beside each one you placed exactly 2 cigarettes, side by side, like a tiny offering, and the whole arrangement looks generous and gracious and completely settled, a host anticipating a guest's desire before the guest has felt it. It is hospitality rendered in tobacco. It is also, if you think about it too long, faintly insane, because the cigarettes cannot be touched. Not during the soup, not during the fish, not through the roast or the salad, because to light one mid-meal would announce that you were impatient with the courses, restless at the table, wishing the whole thing along faster, and that is a rudeness the rules will not permit. So the cigarettes wait. They lie there in plain view, promised and denied, all through dinner, a small still life of temptation at every single place. The 2 cigarettes lie ready, patient, and forbidden. The contradiction is total and no one blinks at it. You have provided the thing and forbidden the thing in the same gesture, set out the ashtray and the cigarettes as a courtesy, while the courtesy of actually using them is against the rules until much later. A guest who wanted to smoke during dinner would find everything necessary sitting right in front of him and would understand completely that he could not. The provision is real. The prohibition is real. They coexist on the same 6 inches of tablecloth. Mr. Ferris, who would clearly enjoy a cigarette with his scotch, does not so much as glance at the 2 beside his plate, because Mr. Ferris knows the rule in his bones. He waits. He turns his attention to the conversation and the meat and lets the cigarettes lie there unused, a man exercising a discipline so ingrained it does not even look like discipline anymore, just manners. You watch him not smoke with a kind of admiration. The whole table is not smoking together beautifully. The rule was never really about the smoke. You have come to understand. It is about pacing, about signalling that you are in no hurry, that the evening is to be savoured course by course and not rushed toward its conclusion. The cigarettes are a test of patience laid at every place, a way of asking each guest to demonstrate that they can sit with a pleasure and decline it until the correct moment. That the pleasure happens to be tobacco is almost incidental. It could be anything the table agreed to want and wait for. And their moment does come, later, with the coffee, when the ban lifts all at once and the whole table exhales into a haze it has been earning for 2 hours, but that is not yet. For now, the cigarettes wait, the ashtrays gleam empty and pristine, and 14 adults sit in a room full of tobacco they have all silently agreed not to touch. You provided the temptation. The rules provided the restraint. Everyone plays their part without a word. You glance at the 2 cigarettes beside your own plate, untouched, patient, gleaming faintly in the candlelight. You will not touch yours either, not yet, not while you are still working the room. The still life holds. 14 little offerings, all refused, all waiting for a bell that has not rung. You are managing the talk at the table the way you manage the soup, keeping it moving, keeping it warm, keeping it away from the topics that curdle a room. The centerpiece is low on purpose so guests can see and talk across the table. because a flower arrangement tall enough to block a face is considered a failure of your basic duty. You draw out the quiet guest. You gently redirect the loud one. You are hosting a conversation the same way you hosted the meal, and it also cannot be allowed to go cold. The centerpiece proves how seriously the rules take this. It sits low, deliberately, a shallow spread of blooms kept beneath the sightline, because a tall arrangement would block faces across the table and cut the conversation in half. And cutting the conversation is a genuine failure of hosting. You chose short flowers this afternoon for exactly this reason. Even the decoration has been engineered in service of the talk, pruned down so that words can travel unobstructed from one side of the cloth to the other. The talk itself is a living thing that can thrive or die, and keeping it alive is your job as much as the roast was. A conversation that stalls, that sinks into an awkward silence while forks scrape, is a small emergency, and you are always half ready to rescue it with a question, a prompt, a turn towards someone who has not spoken. You toss these lifelines out so smoothly they look like idle interest. They are the same relentless attention you have been paying all night, pointed now at the air, not the plates. The forbidden topics are their own map you navigate by feel. Nothing too sharp, nothing that divides the table into camps, none of the subjects that turn a warm room cold and send people home stiff. You feel the conversation drifting toward one of those cliffs and you steer it gently away, a light hand on the wheel, redirecting toward safer ground. The quiet guest is a project all evening. Tonight it is the young woman who brought the carnations, seated between two louder talkers and slowly disappearing, and you will not allow it, so you find the thing she knows about, the small door into her interest, and you open it with a question aimed just at her. She brightens, she speaks, the table turns toward her, and you sit back having performed a small rescue no one witnessed. Drawing out the quiet one is the kindest thing a hostess does, and the least noticed. The loud guest is the opposite problem and requires the opposite touch. There is always one, a man tonight, warming to a monologue that is beginning to flatten the whole table, and you cannot silence him without rudeness, so you wait for the smallest breath and slip in a question to someone else, splitting his stream, opening a second channel of talk, letting the table breathe again. He never feels managed. He feels, if anything, that the conversation simply moved on naturally. And all of it runs alongside the physical work, the watching of glasses and the timing of the next course, so that you are hosting two dinners at once, the one made of food and the one made of talk, both of which must stay warm, both of which curdle the instant you stop tending them. Nobody sees the second dinner being cooked. They only feel that the evening flows, that the talk never dies, that somehow everyone got a turn and no one got trampled. The table laughs at something, all of it at once, the good full sound you have been steering toward all night. For a moment the conversation runs entirely on its own, warm, easy and steady, and you can rest your hands. Then you feel it start to tilt toward one of the cliffs again, and your hand goes quietly back to the wheel. Before dessert, a small bowl of water arrives at each place, a lemon slice or a single flower petal floating on the surface. This is the finger bowl, and it is a test disguised as a courtesy. You are meant to lift the bowl and its little doily off the plate, set both to your upper left, and later dip your fingertips and dry them on your napkin. You are not meant to drink it. Somewhere at this table, or at some table like it, there is always a guest raising the bowl slowly toward their lips. The finger bowl is a relic, and everyone at the table is using a relic together. It descended from an older, grander century when hands genuinely needed rinsing between courses eaten with more fingers than forks, and it has survived into your dining room long after the need for it vanished. A bowl of scented water whose only purpose is to test whether you know what it is. It floats its lemon slice. It waits to see who reaches for a spoon. The water sits clear, scented, and dangerous. The correct choreography is precise and completely unmarked. The bowl arrives sitting on the dessert plate atop a small doily. You lift the bowl and the doily together, both hands, and set them to your upper left, clearing the plate for the dessert to come. Later, at the right moment, you dip your fingertips, only the tips, into the water and dry them discreetly on the napkin in your lap. Nowhere in this is there a step involving your mouth, but nowhere is that written down either, because to a guest who has never met a finger bowl, a small bowl of water with a lemon in it, arriving at the end of a meal, looks exactly like something to drink. It has the shape of a courtesy beverage. The uninitiated guest, reasoning honestly from the evidence, lifts the bowl toward their lips and the table sees it happen, and a small, silent catastrophe blooms in everyone's peripheral vision. And here the rules turn, at last, toward mercy, because there is an old story that tells you what to do. The famous account, passed down through every etiquette book, of the gracious host who saw a guest drink from the finger bowl, and without a flicker lifted his own bowl and drank from it too, so that the guest's error became simply what everyone was doing. Whether it ever truly happened, the story is the instruction. The deepest rule outranks all the others. A guest must never be allowed to feel the mistake. So you watch, tonight, the young carnation guest look at the bowl of water with the lemon in it, and you see the small calculation cross her face, the honest reasoning toward the wrong conclusion, and her fingers close around the bowl, and you are already moving, lifting your own bowl a fraction, ready to make her error the fashion, ready to drink scented lemon water in front of your whole party, to spare one guest a moment of shame. That is what the rule requires, and you would do it without hesitation. But Mr. Ainsley, bless him, gets there first. He catches her eye, dips his own fingertips into his bowl with a small, easy smile, an unmissable little demonstration, and she understands instantly, sets the bowl down unsipped, and dips her fingers as if that had always been the plan. The catastrophe evaporates before it fully formed. Guest saving guest again, quietly, and you sit back with your own bowl untouched, obscurely grateful to a man you recruited by telephone. You dip your own fingertips, dry them on the napkin in your lap, and the whole table completes the little ritual in near unison, lemon water and doilies, and not one drop drunk. The bowls go to the upper left. The plates are clear. Dessert can come. Nobody, thanks to a spare man from a bridge circle, will remember this as the night someone drank the finger bowl. Dessert arrives, and it is often pink, because pink reads as festive and feminine and celebratory in this decade. A pink champagne cake, a moulded dessert, something sweet and pastel, to close the savoury march of courses. The plates were cleared of the finger bowls, the coffee is on its way, and the meal is finally cresting toward its end. You have been on your feet, in your mind, for hours. You get to serve the prettiest thing on the menu, and you get to watch people enjoy it, and you get to keep smiling. The pink is not an accident, it is a whole aesthetic. The decade has decided that pink means celebration, that a pale rose cake or a blushing moulded cream signals festivity and warmth, and a certain feminine softness, and so desserts drift toward the colour the way the drinks did, the pretty pastel things arriving to close the evening on a note of sweetness. Your cake is a soft champagne pink, tall and proud on its stand, and it has been waiting in the kitchen all evening for its entrance like a debutante. The cake is tall, pink, and completely stable, and dessert is, at last, a course you did not have to fight. The roast could have gone dry, the soup could have gone cold, the gelatin could have collapsed, but the cake was finished this morning and has simply been sitting, stable and beautiful, asking nothing further of you. Carrying it out is almost a pleasure. For once you are bringing the table a thing that cannot fail at the last second, and the relief of that is its own small dessert. The cutting is a little performance you get to enjoy. You slice into the pink cake and the layers reveal themselves, pale and even, and you serve each plate with a small flourish you have earned, laying dessert forks and passing the pieces down the table. The cake gives under the knife, and the room smells of coffee and warm sugar. 14 faces turn toward the cake, with the uncomplicated delight that only dessert produces. The one course everyone is simply, honestly glad to see, and for a moment you are not managing anything, only handing people something sweet. Mr. Ainsley accepts his slice with real pleasure, the pleasure of a man who was recruited by telephone last night and has ended up at a genuinely lovely dinner, and he tells you the cake is wonderful with a sincerity the roast never quite earned. You thank him. Of all the guests, he is the one who seems most purely happy to be here, perhaps because he is the only one who did not expect to be, and his easy gratitude is a small gift you did not anticipate. The whole table softens over dessert. The wine and the food and the warmth have done their work. The talk is easy now. The laughter comes without effort, and the cake lands in a room already inclined to enjoy it. This is the peak of the evening, the crest you have been building towards since the doorbell, the moment where the machinery you have been running all night finally produces the thing it was for, which is simply a group of people happy together in a warm room. You let yourself feel it. And you eat your own slice, actually sitting, actually tasting it, because dessert is the one course a hostess can sometimes finish. All the fetching and timing behind her now. The coffee, the only thing left to come. The cake is good. You made it. It is pink and sweet, and it closes the meal exactly as it should. And for a few minutes you are just a woman at her own table eating cake, which is rarer than it should be. Then you feel the evening tip toward its next strange ritual, the one that has been coming since the meal began, and you set down your fork. Because dessert is ending, and the coffee is near, and that means it is almost time for you to stand up and lead all the women out of the room. The meal is done, and now you do the strangest thing of the entire evening. You catch the eye of the most important woman at the table, you rise, and every other woman rises with you and follows you out of the room. You are leaving. On purpose. You are abandoning the dining room to the men so that they can have their serious conversation without you, a ritual inherited from another century that everyone still performs without question. You lead a procession of women into the living room, and behind you a door effectively closes. The signal is silent and yours alone to give. You catch the eye of Mrs. Ostrander, the ranking woman, hold it a beat and rise, and the rising is the whole message, no words required. Around the table every woman reads it instantly and stands as well, gathering herself, and the men half rise in that automatic courtesy, and within seconds the room has split cleanly down the middle along a line nobody drew out loud. You did it with a glance and a movement of your chair. The logic, if you can call it that, is inherited whole from an older century. The men are to be left alone with the coffee and the brandy, so they can turn to the serious talk, business and politics, and whatever is deemed too weighty or too coarse for mixed company, and the women are to withdraw to another room for their own softer conversation. It made a kind of sense in a great house with a smoking room and a drawing room. In a suburban home, it means you are walking your female guests 15 feet down a hall on principle. And the principle is the strange part, because you do not particularly want to leave. The conversation at the table was good. You had built it, tended it, steered it away from its cliffs all night, and now, at its warmest, you are required to stand up and remove half of it to another room, dismantling your own creation because the calendar says centuries and the centuries say the ladies withdraw. So you withdraw and lead the retreat from a battle you were winning. The custom is ancient, strange, and utterly unquestioned. The women follow you into the living room and the mood shifts the instant the doorway is crossed. Shoulders come down. The performance for mixed company relaxes into something easier, franker, the talk turning to the things women actually say to each other when the men are elsewhere, and there is a real pleasure in it, a genuine warmth to the withdrawn half of the party that almost justifies the absurd mechanism that produced it. You settle them, you offer coffee, you become the hostess of the second room. Mrs. Ostrander, in the living room, unbends by a visible degree, and you catch a glimpse of the woman beneath the armour, someone quicker and warmer than she allows herself to be at the table. The withdrawing room does this. Freed from the ranked and watched dinner table, even she softens, and you file the observation away with all the others, a little proof that the rigid apparatus sometimes, accidentally, produces exactly the intimacy it seems designed to prevent. But you cannot fully relax, because you are now running 2 rooms at once, the women here in front of you, and the men behind a door you can no longer see, and part of your attention is already stretched down the hall, wondering if their coffee went out, if the brandy is poured, if the whole divided machine is still running smoothly on both sides. A hostess does not get the luxury of the withdrawal her guests get. You withdrew and immediately started managing the withdrawal. The women's talk flows easy and warm around you, and you tend it with half your mind while the other half keeps watch on the closed door down the hall. Behind it, the men have the dining room, the brandy, and finally, permission to light the cigarettes that have waited beside their plates all night. In the room you just left, the men settle in with brandy, cigars, and the coffee, and they begin the part of the evening that the whole separation was built to protect. This is where the cigarettes at each place finally get lit. The talk turns to business, to politics, to whatever men in 1965 believe requires the absence of their wives. It is understood to be the more important conversation, which is why the women were removed from it, and it happens in a haze of smoke at a table still scattered with your good silver. You can picture the room exactly because you built it. The brandy you set out this afternoon, the coffee you sent in, the cigars your husband keeps for exactly this. and the 2 cigarettes at each place that have waited all through dinner now finally struck and glowing. You are down the hall with the women, but part of you is in there, tracking the room you cannot see, because it is still your room, and your silver and your evening, even behind a closed door. The lighting of the cigarettes is the whole release the meal deferred. All through dinner they lay there, promised and forbidden, and now the ban lifts and the matches come out and the men lean back into the smoke they have been earning for 2 hours. You imagine the small collective exhale, the room hazing over, the ashtrays you polished this afternoon finally being put to their actual purpose, and you feel, oddly, a flicker of satisfaction that the little offerings you set out are at last being accepted. And the talk in there is anointed as the important talk, which is the part that sits strangely with you as you pour coffee for the women. Business, politics, the weighty matters of the day, all of it deemed to require your absence and the absence of every other woman, as though the presence of a wife would somehow curdle a serious sentence. You steered the finest conversation of the evening at that very table an hour ago. Now the same table, minus the women, is where the supposedly real conversation happens. Your husband is in there presiding, playing the host's after-dinner part, and he is good at it, warm and easy with the other men, and you do not begrudge him the role. It is his one long stretch of the evening, the reward for carving the roast, the male half of a division of labour neither of you invented. He will emerge later smelling of cigars and looking pleased, and he will have no clear idea what happened in the women's room, and you will have a fairly precise idea of what happened in his. Because that is the quiet asymmetry of the withdrawal. The men in there are fully absent from the women's room, unaware and untracked, free to forget the other half of the party exists. But you, in the women's room, never fully leave the men's, monitoring the coffee and the brandy and the smoke down the hall with a corner of your attention, running both rooms at once. The silver is what you keep coming back to, in your mind. Your polished forks, your good ashtrays, scattered across a table now clouded with cigar smoke, doing their after-dinner service in a room full of men and no hostess. You will gather it all later, wash the smoke off it, put it back in its felt-lined box in the dark. The men will not think about the silver once. The silver is entirely your concern, before, during, and after, on both sides of the closed door. Down the hall the smoke thickens and the men's voices rise and fall in the register of important things being said. You cannot hear the words. You do not need to. You refill a coffee cup in the women's room, keep the warm talk going around you, and wait for the moment the door opens and the two halves of your party become one again. Coffee is served, and with it comes a small ceremony. The cigarettes that sat forbidden through dinner are now offered formally, a host or a butler presenting them to the men as a courtesy. The match struck, the first real smoke of the night curling up toward the ceiling. Everything about this moment is choreographed, down to who offers and who accepts. You spent the whole meal enforcing a ban on the very thing that is now being handed around on a tray, and no one finds this strange, because the rules were never about the smoke. The ceremony assumes a servant who does not exist. In the book, a butler carries the coffee and presents the offering on a silver tray, gliding between the guests, and the whole gesture has the smoothness of a household with staff. In your house, the butler is you, or your husband, and the graceful presentation is performed by two tired people, improvising the movements of servants they have never had, carrying trays they polish themselves. The ceremony is real. The staff is imaginary. You perform both parts. The coffee is the thing you actually care about here, because coffee is where a good evening can quietly fall apart at the finish. You bought the good beans, ground them fresh, brewed it strong and hot, because weak or bitter coffee at the end of a fine meal undoes everything that came before it, sends people home with a sour last impression no roast can repair. So the coffee gets the same attention the soup got, hot, correct, served in the small cups that mean the meal is truly ending. The little cups are their own signal. Demitasse, the small after-dinner cups, brought out only now, and their appearance tells the whole party that the evening has reached its final movement. You carry them in on a tray, one hand steadying the load, and their smallness is deliberate, a formality that says this is not a mug of coffee at the kitchen table. This is the ceremonial close of a formal dinner, sipped slowly, savoured, the last sustained note before the guests begin to think about their coats. The coffee comes dark, strong, and faintly ceremonial, and the coffee crosses the divide, the withdrawal created. because both rooms get it, the men's room and the women's. Coffee carried to each half of your split party so that both sides reach the evenings close together even while apart. You are pouring in the living room, sending cups down the hall, keeping both rooms supplied, the coffee, the one thing that flows freely between the two territories your own customs carved. It is the first thread beginning to stitch the divided party back together. Mr. Ainsley takes his coffee with the same easy gratitude he has taken everything tonight, and thanks you again, and you realize he has thanked you more than any other guest. This man recruited by telephone who keeps behaving as though the whole evening were an unexpected kindness done to him. In a way, it was. You needed a 14th and got a genuinely pleasant guest, and his steady, quiet thankfulness has been, unexpectedly, one of the warmer notes of the night. The choreography of the offering, meanwhile, is one more way of marking time. The band during dinner, the offering after, the small cups, the tray, all of it divides the hours into acts with clear curtains, so that everyone always knows exactly where in the evening they are. You have been running a clock made of courtesies, and the coffee is how it chimes the final hour. You pour the last cup, send it down the hall, and stand a moment with the empty tray against your hip. The smoke rises in the men's room, the coffee warms both halves of the house, and you can feel the evening beginning. At last, its slow turn back toward one another. After a decent interval, the men rejoin the women, and the party becomes a single party again. The doors open, the two conversations merge, and everyone behaves as though the last half hour of deliberate separation was the most natural thing in the world. You steer the reunion, refresh the after-dinner drinks, and read the room for the first signs that people are ready to think about leaving. The evening has passed its peak. From here it is a slow, controlled descent toward the front door, and you are still the one flying the plane. The interval has to be decent, which means neither too short nor too long, and judging it is one more thing left quietly to you. Too soon, and the men look as though they could not manage without the women, or the women without a smoke of gossip. Too long, and the party sags into two stalled halves. Somewhere in between is the right moment, felt rather than measured, and you feel it arrive and give the small cue, and the men drift back in smelling of cigars, and the room knits itself whole. The merging is seamless in a way that should be stranger than it is. Half an hour ago you split the party down the middle on the authority of a dead century, and now the two halves fold back together and no one remarks on it. No one finds it odd that they were sent to separate rooms and summoned back, everyone simply resuming as though the interruption were as natural as breathing. You watch it close over like water. The custom is invisible precisely because everyone performs it without a flicker of surprise. And the reunited room has a different quality than the room before dinner. Softer, looser, and warmer all the way through. The cocktail hour stiffness is long gone, the ranking and processing behind everyone, and what is left is the easy late evening warmth of people who have eaten and drunk well together, and let their guards down by degrees. This is the party at its most genuinely pleasant, and it is also, the beginning of the end, because a party this relaxed is a party starting to think about home. So you begin to read the room for departure, a skill as fine as any tonight. The small signs, a glance at a watch disguised as a stretch, a couple catching each other's eye across the room, a slight settling in the voices, the conversation shifting from expansive to summary. You catch these signals early, before the guests fully know they are sending them, because a good hostess manages the leaving as carefully as the arriving, and the leaving has its own rules and its own dangers. Mrs. Ostrander, predictably, will be the one to leave first and correctly, at the right hour, neither early enough to insult nor late enough to overstay, and her departure will give the others permission to begin their own. You know this about her, and you are counting on it, because the first to leave sets the tempo for all the rest, and you would rather it be someone with her impeccable sense of timing than someone who lingers past the evening's natural close and forces you to yawn meaningfully. You refresh a few glasses, but lightly now, no longer pushing the drinks the way you did at the peak, because your job has quietly shifted from filling the room to easing it toward the door. You are decelerating the party by degrees, a hand on the throttle bringing a warm, loud evening gently down toward the quiet of its ending without anyone feeling the descent. Nobody should sense they are being wound down. They should simply discover, at the right moment, that it was their own idea to leave. The room hums along in its warm, reunited state, and you move through it, steering, reading, easing, still working while everyone else has finally, fully relaxed. Across the room, Mrs. Ostrander sets down her cup and reaches, with perfect timing, for the small clutch that means she is about to begin the graceful business of leaving. Some dinners matter more than others, and the one where your husband's boss is coming is a different animal entirely. This is not a social evening. It is a performance review conducted over a roast, and your husband standing at the firm is understood to ride partly on how smoothly you run the table. You have polished harder, planned longer, and worried more. The boss's wife will notice the silver, the cloth, the timing, all of it. You are cooking for a promotion, and no one at the table will ever say that out loud. The stakes change the very air of the house. An ordinary dinner is a pleasure with pressure attached. The boss dinner is pressure with a dinner wrapped around it, and everyone involved knows it and no one names it. Your husband is quieter in the days before, checking small things, and you understand that his career has been quietly placed in your oven, that a dry roast tonight is not a dry roast but a mark against him, and that this is somehow considered a normal arrangement. Mr. Vandermeer, the boss, is not the one you are really cooking for. He will eat, praise the meat, talk business with your husband, and leave with a general impression. It is his wife who conducts the actual inspection. She arrives with a pleasant smile and a gaze that misses nothing, and within minutes she has read the cloth, the silver, the flowers, the ease or strain in your movements, and formed a verdict that will travel back to a world you will never see, in conversations you will never hear. Mrs. Vandermeer performs the inspection so gently you could almost miss it. She admires the table, and in admiring it she prices it. She compliments the roast, and in complimenting it she grades it. At one point she runs a single gloved fingertip along the edge of the cloth, an idle gesture, a small caress of the damask, and you know she has just felt for the felt pad underneath, the one missus. Halloran always recommends and you never remember to buy, and you feel the absence of it like a missing tooth. So you run this table tighter than any other, every rule observed, every course perfect. Because tonight the whole apparatus has a purpose beyond itself. The 18-inch cloth, the ranked seating, the flawless silver, all of it aimed at the verdict Mrs. Vandermeer will carry home. The whole table has to be flawless, smooth and effortless. Mr. Vandermeer asks for the gravy a second time and tells your husband the roast is the best he has had in a year. Your husband, quiet all week, lets his shoulders come down half an inch. Across the table, his wife turns her dessert plate a quarter inch so the pattern faces her, and nods at it, a tiny private grade. You catch every one of these small motions and keep pouring, keep smiling, keep the platters moving. You have rehearsed the timing for 3 days and it holds. The soup arriving scalding, the fish on its own fork, the roast pink at the centre, each course landing on the beat like a thing that assembled itself. The candles have burned to the flattering height. The gravy holds. Nothing on the table betrays the hours behind it. Whatever comes of the evening will be his, spoken of later as evidence of his good judgment in marriage, and you knew that walking in. You set the table anyway. Mrs. Vandermeer sets down her fork, tells you the evening has been just lovely, and means it, and the verdict is sealed in your favour. Your husband catches your eye down the table and very slightly lifts his glass to you. It is the only toast you will get tonight, and you take it. Somewhere in the house are your children, and the rule is that no guest should ever have to encounter them. They were fed earlier, separately, and put to bed or confined to a distant room before the first car pulled into the drive. A proper adult dinner party has no children in it, none at the table, none underfoot, none appearing in pyjamas to ask a question at the worst possible moment. You have staged the evening as if you do not have a family, and part of your job tonight is keeping that illusion intact. The children ate at 5, alone, at the kitchen table, a simpler meal served hours before the guests arrived, and that early dinner was its own small operation folded inside the larger one. You fed them, washed them, and began the delicate work of settling them somewhere out of the party's path, because the adult evening requires a childless house, and you are to produce a childless house out of a house that plainly contains children. It is one more illusion added to the pile. The logic is old and firm. A formal dinner is adult territory, a place for careers and conversation and the serious business of grown-up social life, and children are understood to belong to a separate world that must not intrude on it. So they are removed, not unkindly but completely, tucked into bedrooms at the far end of the house, and the party proceeds as though the hostess sprang into being fully grown with clean hands and no dependents. The family is edited out of the frame for the night. Your daughter is the risk, because your daughter is small and curious and does not yet understand why the house is filled with strangers in good clothes. She was fascinated earlier by the ritual of your dressing, the painted face, the empty lipstick tube you handed her to buy 3 minutes of peace. Now she is meant to be asleep, and you know, the way a mother knows, that she is not asleep, that she is lying awake down the hall listening to the grown-up sounds and building up the courage to investigate. And sure enough, at the worst possible moment, there is a small figure in the hallway doorway in pajamas, clutching the lipstick tube, blinking at the light and the crowd, on the verge of a very loud question about why everyone is still awake. You see her before anyone else does, because half your attention has been aimed down that hallway all night for exactly this. You are moving before she can speak, crossing the room with a hostess's smooth, unhurried stride that is, underneath, a controlled sprint. You reach her, you scoop her, you murmur something about a special grown-up party and a promise of pancakes in the morning, and you carry her back down the hall before the party has registered the interruption, depositing her in bed with a firmness wrapped in warmth. She protests, mildly, negotiates for a glass of water, and you grant it because the water buys silence, and silence is the entire objective. The whole rescue takes 90 seconds and no guest will ever know it happened. The strangeness of it settles on you as you walk back, smoothing your dress. You have spent the evening performing a version of yourself with no children, in a home with no children, for guests who all have children of their own and are all, in their own houses on their own party nights, performing the exact same disappearance. An entire social world agreeing to pretend, for a few hours, that the next generation is not asleep just down the hall, waiting to ask why. The house has to look adult, quiet, and childless. You rejoin the party, radiant and childless once more, the interruption erased as cleanly as the cans in the trash. Down the hall, a small light clicks off under a door, and your daughter, clutching a lipstick tube, finally mercifully sleeps. It happens at some point, because it always does. A guest reaches for the wrong fork, or lifts the finger bowl toward their mouth, or refolds the napkin, or commits some small visible error that the whole table registers in the same silent instant. Now the etiquette turns its attention to you, because the deepest rule of all is that a gracious host never lets a guest feel the mistake. You are supposed to cover for it, smoothly, invisibly, maybe by making the same error yourself so it stops being an error at all. Tonight the error is a glass. A nervous first-time guest, gesturing to make a point, catches the base of a wine glass with the back of a hand, and it goes over, and a spreading bloom of red wine begins to move across the flawless white cloth you measured to 18 inches this afternoon. The table sees it happen, the guest sees the table see it, and in the half-second that follows, everyone waits to learn what kind of evening this is going to be. The rules are absolutely clear about what happens next, and they point entirely at you. A lesser hostess gasps, or leaps up, or exclaims over the cloth, and in doing so turns a small accident into a large humiliation that the guest will carry home and lie awake over for a week. The deepest rule of hosting forbids exactly this. The stain does not matter, the guest matters, and your whole job, in this half-second, is to make the spilled wine the least important thing in the room. So you are already moving, already smiling, already saying that it is nothing, these things happen, the cloth was due for a wash anyway, waving away the apology before it can fully form. You drop a napkin over the bloom, not frantically but casually, almost carelessly, as though a spreading red stain were a minor weather event rather than the ruin of an afternoon's work. You do not blot with your whole soul. You dab, lightly, and turn back to the conversation as if nothing has happened, because the performance of not caring is the entire cure. Mrs. Halloran taught you the master move, and you deploy a small version of it now. She once, seeing a guest mortified by a spill, reached over and tipped a splash of her own wine onto the cloth, laughing, so that the guest was suddenly one of two people who had spilled rather than the only one. You do not go that far tonight, but you reach for your own glass, take a hearty sip, and set it down with a slight deliberate clumsiness that says, without a word, that this is a table where a person is allowed to be human. The nervous guest watches you fail to care, and you can see the shame drain out of them by degrees, replaced by a flood of grateful relief. That relief is the thing you are actually serving. Not the roast, not the cake, but the safety of a room where a mistake does not become a catastrophe, where a person can knock over a glass and be met with warmth instead of ice. You gave them that in a half second, invisibly, and they will remember the warmth long after they have forgotten the wine. And this, you have come to believe, is the one rule in the whole absurd apparatus that is actually worth keeping. All the forks and the finger bowls and the 18 inches are a test that sorts people. But this rule, the one that says protect the guest from shame, is the opposite of a test. It is a small daily mercy dressed up as etiquette, the apparatus turning for once toward kindness. You honour it completely, every time, without hesitation. The stain sits hidden under a napkin, the conversation flows on undisturbed, and the nervous guest laughs at something, fully recovered. The cloth is ruined. You will deal with it at midnight. Right now, a person feels safe at your table, and that is worth a great deal more than a tablecloth. The invitation specified the dress, and the dress code is not a suggestion. Black tie means a tuxedo for the men, and a gown, or cocktail dress for the women. White tie, the most formal of all, means tailcoats and long gloves, and it is already becoming rare outside of official Washington. Your gloves come off for eating and drinking, stay on for dancing and the receiving line, and are managed at the table with a whole quiet protocol of their own. A guest dressed to the wrong degree of formality is visible to everyone from across the room. The code is written in a shorthand everyone is simply expected to have memorized. 2 small words in the corner of an invitation, black tie, and a whole wardrobe is summoned into being. The tuxedo pressed, the gown chosen, the exact degree of formality understood without a syllable of explanation. There is no glossary. You are assumed to know, and the assumption is itself part of the sorting, because a person who does not know what the 2 words mean will announce it the moment they walk through the door in the wrong clothes. White tie is the summit, and it is already fading. Tailcoats, long gloves, the full ceremonial plumage of an older order, so formal it now survives, mostly in official Washington, and a few determined households clinging to the old ways. To receive a white tie invitation in the suburbs is almost startling, a summons to a level of formality that feels borrowed from a costume drama, and you would have to think carefully about whether you even own the required pieces, because the code does not care whether you can meet it, only whether you do. The gloves are the part that governs your own hands all evening. Long gloves at a formal event, and a whole quiet protocol for their management, because a lady wears her gloves through the arrival and the receiving and the standing about, but never ever to eat. Gloves at the table are unthinkable. So at some point, gracefully, without drawing an eye, you must get them off, and later, gracefully, get them back on. And the transition is a small performance folded inside the larger one. The removal itself is an art you learned young and still respect. You do not peel them off at the table like a woman shucking corn. You slip them off before you sit, or in the first quiet moment, easing each finger free and drawing the glove down smoothly, and then you dispose of them, tucked into a lap or a small bag, out of sight, because a discarded glove draped over a chair is untidy, and untidiness is its own failure. The gloves must vanish as cleanly as they appeared. Mrs. Delacroix, the woman with the bank-printed invitations, manages her long gloves with a fluency that borders on the supernatural, easing them off between the receiving line and the table in a single unbroken motion, folding them into her clutch without looking, so that they are simply gone, present one moment and absent the next. You have watched for the seam in the performance and never found it. She was clearly raised inside the code so completely that its hardest moves look, on her, like nothing at all. And the whole system of codes exists, like so much of tonight, to be read across a room in an instant. A man in the wrong degree of formality, too casual or too grand for the 2 words on the invitation, is visible immediately, marked before he has said a word, sorted by his lapels. It is efficient, merciless, and cruel. A language that speaks the loudest about the people who cannot speak it, and everyone in the room reads it fluently whether they admit to reading it or not. You draw your own gloves off in the first quiet moment, ease each finger free, and fold them out of sight with a motion you have made 10,000 times. Correctly dressed, correctly gloved, correctly ungloved. One more code met, and the gloves go into your lap to wait. Not every gathering is the full formal siege, and lately you have noticed a looser kind of evening creeping in. Someone got a fondue set as a wedding gift, and now there is a pot of melted cheese bubbling in the middle of the table and everyone is reaching into it with long colour-coded forks. There is no procession. There is no rank. There is no soup, fish, roast, salad march of courses, just people dipping bread into a communal pot and burning their fingers together. It feels modern, it feels slightly bohemian, and it feels quietly like the beginning of the end. The fondue set arrived, like all of them seem to, as a wedding gift, a pot and a little burner and a bundle of long forks with coloured tips so no one loses track of theirs. It sat in a cupboard for a while, looking faintly ridiculous. And then one evening, it came out. And the evening it produced was so different from the formal dinner that you almost did not recognise it as the same social species. Everyone gathered around one bubbling pot. Everyone stayed put. Everyone, astonishingly, relaxed. The communal pot changes everything, because a communal pot has no head and no foot. There is no place of honour beside a fondue pot, no first-ranked seat, no spiralling hierarchy descending toward the centre, because the centre is where the food is and everyone reaches into it equally. The whole apparatus of rank that governs the formal table simply cannot get a grip on a shared pot of cheese. The pot democratizes the table by sitting in the middle of it, molten and indifferent. And the forks are colour-coded because everyone is reaching into the same place, which is a sentence that would have scandalised your grandmother. At a formal dinner, every person has their own sealed territory of plate and silver. At fondue, the shared pot is the entire point. People lean in, dip, wait, pull back a dripping cube, burn their fingers, laugh about it, and the burning and the laughing are shared in a way the formal table never permitted. The Merrows, a younger couple, host these evenings without a scrap of the anxiety you carry to a formal dinner, and watching them is a small revelation. Missus. Merrow does not measure a cloth or polish a fish fork or agonize over rank. She sets a pot in the middle of the table, pours the wine, and lets the evening run itself, and it does run itself, warmly, easily, with none of the invisible machinery you exhaust yourself operating. You cannot tell whether you envy her or pity the loss of the whole elaborate art. You suspect you envy her, because the fondue pot is a crack in a wall, and you can feel the wall giving way behind it. Everything the formal dinner insists on, the rank, the procession, the sealed territories, the 7 timed courses, all of it is quietly contradicted by a pot of cheese that asks for none of it and warms the room anyway. No 18 inches of anything required. And you have done all that work for years, believed in it, mastered it, ruined your hands for it. So the fondue pot is not entirely comfortable to sit beside. The daughters at these tables will not learn the fish fork, or measure a cloth, or keep 2 spare men in their pocket. The pot is easy, warm and winning, and part of you is relieved and part of you is not. You reach into the pot with your colour-coded fork, pull out a dripping cube of bread, and burn your fingers slightly on the hot fork, and laugh, along with everyone else. It is, you have to admit, a nice evening. That is exactly the problem. The morning after any party you attend, you owe a letter. Not a phone call, not a wave across the fence, a written note of thanks to your hostess, by hand, on proper paper, mailed promptly. It even has a name, the bread and butter letter, and skipping it is not an option available to a person who wishes to be invited anywhere again. So you sit at your own kitchen table the next morning, still tired from your own dinners, and you write to thank someone else for hers, because the ledger of obligation never actually closes. The letter has a name which tells you how seriously it is taken. The bread and butter letter, a phrase old enough to have worn smooth, a fixed obligation with a fixed form, owed to any hostess who has fed you at her table. It is not optional, and it is not casual. It is a debt that comes due the morning after, and a woman who fails to pay it develops, slowly, a reputation that thins her invitations over a season or two until she finds herself, without quite knowing why, no longer asked. The rules of the thing are specific. By hand, always, because a typed note of thanks is barely a note of thanks at all, an insult wearing the costume of a courtesy. On proper paper, good stationery, not a torn scrap. Promptly, within a day or two, while the dinner is still warm in everyone's memory, because a thank you that arrives 2 weeks late reads as a thank you extracted by guilt rather than offered by grace. And the note must say something, which is the small daily challenge of it. Not merely thank you for dinner, flat and generic, but a specific warm sentence or two naming a real pleasure of the evening, the roast, the conversation, the particular kindness of the seating. The hostess will read it and know instantly whether you are paying attention or simply discharging a duty, and a good bread and butter letter proves you noticed her labour, which is, after all, the only reward she ever really gets for it. So you sit this morning with your own hands still tired, still faintly grey at the knuckles from your own silver, and you write to Missus. Pearson to thank her for the dinner she gave last week, finding the specific true thing to say about an evening at which you were, frankly, also working, also reading the room, also performing. Two hostesses thanking each other in turn, each knowing exactly what the other's smooth evening cost, neither ever saying so. The letters are a code between women who all understand the price. Mrs. Ostrander, of course, has already sent hers to you, arriving with the promptness of a woman constitutionally unable to owe anything. Her note specific, warm, and flawlessly correct. Naming your gravy by name, you read it with the complicated pleasure of being both appreciated and, faintly, out-mannered because she has thanked you correctly before you have even finished thanking Mrs. Pearson, and the ledger tips slightly in her favour again. She always sends hers first. It is not a competition. It is absolutely a competition. And the ledger is the real subject of the letter. The endless soft accounting of dinners eaten and dinners owed and gratitude paid and gratitude pending. A system with no final balance and no closing date. You will thank Mrs. Pearson, who will one day dine with you and thank you, and you will attend and be thanked, on and on, the obligations circulating forever like the wine circulated last night, everyone always owing someone a letter or a dinner or a note. It never closes. It is not designed to close. It is designed to keep everyone bound, gently, in a web of small perpetual debts. You sign the note, blot it, fold it, and address the envelope to Mrs. Pearson in your best hand, the tired but correct hand of a woman who knows the rules and keeps them. One debt paid, a dozen others, in both directions, still open on the books that never balance. The last guest is gone, the door is closed, and the house is suddenly, completely quiet. You are standing in a dining room that looks like a battlefield. 14 place settings of dirty silver, glasses ringed with lipstick, the tablecloth you measured to 18 inches now stained with wine and gravy. The performance is over. There is no audience left, and there is no butler, and there is no footman. There is only you, in your good dress, in a silent kitchen at midnight, deciding whether to start the dishes now or leave them until morning. The quiet is the first thing, and it is enormous. For hours the house was full of voices and clinking and the warm rising noise of a party going well, and now the last car has pulled out of the drive and the silence rushes back in to fill the space, the ringing quiet of a room that was loud a moment ago. You stand in it, your ears still full of conversation that is no longer happening. The dining room is a wreck, and it is your wreck alone. All the silver you polished this afternoon is scattered, dirty, and forgotten. The white cloth you measured to the inch is a map of the party. Wine here, gravy there, a candle's drip, a crumb of pink cake. The glasses stand in a forest of lipstick prints and melted ice. It will all be cleaned up by exactly one person, in heels, at midnight, and here is where the whole absurd truth of the thing stands fully revealed, in the empty room with no one left to perform for. All evening you played the part of a hostess with invisible staff, gliding through a formal dinner as though a kitchen full of servants stood just out of frame. Now the frame is empty. The servants were always imaginary. The butler who was supposed to clear these plates is you, tired, in a stained dress. And the footman who should carry the silver is also you, and there is no one to hand any of it to. You take off the gloves first, finally, the long gloves that hid your grey hands all evening, and there underneath are your own real hands, silver-stained and aching, the hands that did every bit of the work the gloves pretended away. You flex them in the quiet. They are the truest thing in the house right now, more honest than the cloth or the silver or the serene painted face you have worn since the doorbell. The performance kept them hidden. The performance is over. Here they are. You decide to do the glasses, at least tonight, because glasses left overnight go cloudy, and you run the hot water and stand at the sink in your good dress washing lipstick off crystal one piece at a time. The steam rises. The water is warm on your ruined hands, and somewhere in the mechanical quiet of it, washing up alone at midnight, you feel something that is not quite pride and not quite exhaustion but is made of both. The specific feeling of having pulled off, single-handed, a thing that was supposed to take a staff, because you did pull it off. The roast was perfect, and the soup was hot, and the finger bowl was survived and the wine was covered, and not one guest ever saw the machinery, the imaginary servants, the small girl in the hallway, or the cans in the trash. The evening was seamless. It only cost you the entire day, both your hands And the hours between midnight and whenever these dishes are finally done, nobody will ever know the price. That was the whole point. You set a clean glass in the rack, where it catches the little light over the sink and throws it back, the one bright thing in the dark kitchen. Then you reach for the next one, and the water runs warm, and the house sleeps around you, and the party that took a week to build dissolves quietly into a stack of drying dishes, and a woman finally, almost, allowed to rest. And so you spent the night measuring a tablecloth to the inch, ranking your friends in ink, unmolding a shrimp from a dome of lime gelatin, and drinking scented lemon water in front of everyone so a nervous guest wouldn't have to feel the shame of drinking it first. You hid the cans. You memorized the drinks. You led all the women out of a room you were perfectly enjoying because a dead century said so. You survived the fish fork. You did it all with grey hands hidden inside white gloves. It's easy to laugh at the rules, and we have, all night. But somewhere behind every one of them was a real woman doing an enormous amount of invisible work and making it look like nothing at all. She polished the silver alone. She timed the roast alone. She stood at the sink at midnight in her good dress, washing lipstick off the crystal, having pulled off single-handed a performance that was written for a house full of servants she never had. There's a quiet skill in that, in keeping a whole warm evening running while never once being seen to work. The fondue pot was already bubbling on the next block, though, promising a world with no rank and no procession and no 18 inches of anything. The wall was cracking. Most of these rules were gone within the decade, remembered mostly through the gelatin. Thank you so much for spending this hour here with me, drifting through a world of place cards and finger bowls and 2 cigarettes nobody was allowed to smoke. You don't have to remember any of it. You don't have to write anyone a thank you note in the morning. So let your shoulders drop. Let the glasses stay unwashed. Let the tablecloth, wherever it is, be as wrinkled as it likes. Let your hands rest, ungloved, on top of the blanket, and let the quiet of the house settle over you the way it settled over her at midnight, when the last car had finally gone. There is nothing left to serve. There is no one left to impress. Sleep well.